Okay, this is the October 17th meeting of the Bristol Planning Commission. It is 7:07 and we'll call the meeting to order. The first item is to review the agenda for additions, removals, adjustments of any items. I sent out some stuff late this afternoon that should have been attached but wasn't, and I was late to the game. So there is the minutes for the October 3rd meeting that were sent out just this afternoon, and there are two documents that are related to public notice and communication. Hopefully seen those or have. Are there any other additions or alterations to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll keep it as it is and keep going. So the next topic, we put in a public comment at the beginning of the meeting, as well as one we typically have at the end of the meeting. And we've allowed 5 minutes for public comment. Hopefully we can kind of keep to that allotment depending on what people have to say. A few pieces of protocol: all conversations, public and commission members, should be addressed to the chair, not discussion with each other. It's best that the commission members listen to what the public has to say. It's not a time for debate necessarily. And the public, the planning commission will remain mindful of in their deliberations of public comment. So with that in mind, we have people interested in making statements. Who would like to go first?
I will.
Okay.
All right.
Can you, so Tom Fox?
Yes, my name is Tom Fox. And I'm going to read my statement. Request a change to the United Development Regulations.
Can you come up a little bit closer?
May I sit at the table?
Absolutely.
Okay. Request a change to the United Development Regulations. I request that the conditional use business yard be removed from the RA5 zoning description on page 26, and that the C be removed from the RA5 column in the table on page 16 for the reasons listed below. The quotes in this statement are from the UDR. The definition of business yard includes a site used primarily to store and maintain construction, landscaping, or similar heavy equipment and other materials and facilities customarily required by a contractor in the building, landscaping, or construction-related trades or similar businesses, where the majority of business activity takes place off-site. End of that quote. The objectives and guidelines for RA5 includes: the purpose of this district is to allow for the maintenance of towns working farmland, forest land, and open spaces, while providing opportunities for low-density rural living and resource-based small businesses. The desired character of this district is that of rural countryside, where residential development is compatible with and surrounded by agricultural uses, forest uses, and open spaces. End of that quote. In my opinion, these two statements are incompatible. A site used to store and maintain construction, landscaping, or similar heavy equipment and other materials is not compatible with the objectives and guidelines stated to allow low-density rural living and resource-based small businesses. Storing, maintaining, and especially transporting heavy equipment and materials is not compatible with the idea of rural countryside. If a business yard is used to store construction materials, such as topsoil and gravel, between jobs, the noise created by heavy equipment moving that material and the movement of the heavy equipment itself is disturbing to the neighborhood. Heavy equipment used by a contractor in the building, landscaping, or construction-related trades is not consistent with the objectives and guidelines statement for small businesses, unless there is a limit on the size of the equipment used in the business yard. Other zoning descriptions where a business yard may be permitted are commercial, C1, and village mixed, VM. RA5 zoning is closer to RA2 zoning than either C1 or VM. RA2 does not permit conditional use business yard. The objectives and guidelines for C1 and VM zoning descriptions are essentially different from RA5 and RA2 in that they do not seek to promote the character of rural countryside for RA5 or rural character for RA2. I believe and feel that the intent of RA5 zoning is that of a neighborhood where small businesses may exist with residential dwellings and not a place for construction-related trades or small businesses. Examples of resource-based small businesses include, but are not limited to, sugar maple production, seamstress, daycare, farming, woodworking, where the business is confined to family members or perhaps 1 or 2 employees. This is a place where the residents live and work without producing noise that is distressing to the neighbors.
Thanks.
Okay, are there any questions?
Don't see any.
No, I guess not. A question?
Is this in response to something?
Well, it is. All right. So at one of your previous meetings, either the last one or the one before, there was a discussion about the definition for business yard. And that got me to thinking that I had the opportunity to state my my opinion. Okay.
So Tom did forward that to the offices by hand, so I can distribute that to the entire commission if that's desired.
Could we make that a part of the record at this meeting?
Yes.
We would appear in full.
Yes.
And in fact, if you would like, you could have my copy.
Who's
That's
taking
kind,
minutes?
thank you.
I am.
Yes.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, we've
with
got.
Chris.
the
You all set?
Okay.
Oh, you've got the copy. You got it.
I have a copy. And
From up there.
it may work better to get to the microphone,
Ow.
if you will.
Okay. My name is Carol Wells, and my husband and I own Bristol Suites in downtown Bristol. And I'm here as a resource. I know you've been discussing the definition of inn versus bed and breakfast and hotel. And we would encourage you to not require the owner or resident manager for an inn. I think that would seriously limit the possibility of having successful in downtown. And I think that that's not a consequence that you would like to promote. And I don't see that there's a very good logical reason to require that for an inn. So I'm here to act as a resource. If you have any questions about being an innkeeper or the finances of an inn or economics, that may help give you information to make a decision, I'd be happy to do so. What questions do you have?
Hi, this is Anna Taylor. I'm over here, but I'm not in the room. I'm on Zoom. So I think thank you for coming, Carol. Appreciate you stating where you're coming from. I think as someone who lives in the village, who has actually stayed at your inn before, so that's my context. And obviously, we like to have a resource in town. I think that one of the things I always look at when we look at proposed changes to our regulations is to really try to consider what is appropriate for all potential iterations, current, future, right, of an inn, and what would be reasonable to actually attract someone to want to do this in our little town, right? And then also what would make it a good experience for those who live near, around, and, you know, engage with the people who are staying at the inn or parking at the inn or coming and going. And I think that I can understand the financial constraints of needing to have someone occupy one of your available spaces, right? And you're in, like, okay, now I have to have someone who, even if they don't live here, they can spend 24 hours here, right? Or in shifts, spend 24 hours here. How would you propose, if you know, we're having a conversation about this, to make it possible for anyone who has a question for the innkeeper, or, you know, in the case of something that isn't right, has a complaint or a concern or an emergency or just a neighborly issue, how would you propose addressing that if you don't have someone who is either the owner occupied or the resident manager of the inn? I'm just curious from your perspective, since you do this for a living.
And we certainly considered that when we, I mean, we did live there for 10 years. Over the 11 years since we started the inn, we've had a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week answering service that people can call, and they track us down within minutes, and we can respond to the issue. I think we've only had something happen once, where actually a guest left the water running. She went in to talk to her husband and forgot she had left the water running, and I'm not quite sure how it overflowed the sink, why the safety thing didn't kick in, but it came down through the second floor all the way down to the first floor, the water. And actually, I was in the building that night, and I found out about it because they called our number, the answering service called me, and, you know, I happened to be there in a few minutes, but, you know, I was in the building and didn't even know that that incident had happened until the answering service. So I think with the answering service, you know, they're really good. We have a whole protocol. If they call one person and we're supposed to call them back and say, I got your message. If we don't respond, they go down the list, call the next person, you know, until they do reach somebody in an emergency.
And you're providing this number, obviously, to people who are staying at your inn. That makes sense.
Yes.
Is it also, just out of curiosity, something that you post publicly or not? I'm just curious.
Yes, it's actually on our front door,
Okay.
the front door of the inn. And it says it's our answering service to call.
Thank you.
I mean,
That's helpful information.
If we don't pick it up, if it's our main number, if we don't pick it up after 3 rings, it goes to the answering service.
Thank you so much, Carol. I appreciate your answers.
Sure.
So we have, and I didn't say it to Tom, I should have, but we did revise in our draft the definition of hotel and guest facility. So
Is it
um
okay?
And
In and guest. Okay. All
I
right.
don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't.
It shows revised, but we haven't voted on that.
Mhm.
Right,
That's right.
So
It's draft form, not
it's
approved.
draft form.
Yeah.
well,
Okay.
it's not approved by this committee to go forward into the draft that goes forward to what the select board is and thereon, right?
Yes, so
Right,
it's
you all
part
have
of
not
the,
approved it yet.
part of the discussion for this evening, so that's. We are considering it, I guess you could say.
Okay, I have a question. When it says at all times, manager or personnel on duty all times, would the 24-hour answering service count as that?
No,
I think that was the reason for my question in part, Carol. And
Yeah.
I totally get where you're coming from, right? I mean, I know it's hard to have availability, right? But I think that, you know, an answering service may or may not be able to get you someone on site, right away. You know, I mean, I get it. Like, if you have a person on call and it's you or your husband or whoever might be working for you or covering for you if you're out of town and you don't pick up, then the answering service gets it. It's like, okay, I got an answering service. But I think it's that doesn't quite tick the box, right? Because it's not, oh, this person is on duty, and if someone needs to come right away, they're close enough that they can be there right away. I think that's the distinction. not being unsympathetic to your realities. And I know your answering service is obviously meeting a critical need for your guests and obviously potentially any neighbors who might need to contact you. But inside of the definition, just to be clear, that doesn't qualify. So that is
So
a
they
distinction. It's a compromise, I guess you could say, but it's not doesn't meet the requirement.
Right.
Yeah.
And what is the logic behind that? I mean, why for inns and not other businesses? That somebody has to be on duty?
Who does your answering service call?
Well, first they call me, and if I don't answer, we have 2 innkeepers, they call them. If they don't get back, then they call our handyman. We have a whole list.
So you've got a hierarchy. of
They've
people.
never, yeah, and we've always, and then, they call back. If nobody calls, they go through it again. We've never had a case where nobody's responded.
So in essence, you've got people on call.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
on duty.
yeah,
Yeah.
Because
And I
the
think
right.
to be
So
clear,
that's
Carol,
Sorry.
and I want to be very clear about this because I think this is really important, right? It's not a consideration of the Bristol Suites and the Wells family in this case. We're trying to write regulations that would work no matter who owned an inn. And then something that, I think you guys have been good citizens, good members of our community. You're trying to put a solution in place, right? We want to make sure that regulations make it very, very clear what the requirements are. It's why it's under discussion. It's why it's a draft. We haven't approved it. We're talking about what would allow us to make a regulation that's reasonable for a business owner to actually meet the requirement, that also would protect our village, our neighbors, even the guests of such a facility, right? But I think in particular, thinking about sort of where does this facility operate in our overall environment in our community in a way that's positive and it's very clear, particularly, and I'm not, this is why I'm trying to separate it from you, right? And your particular business. What if something isn't good, right? What are the protections, options? I wouldn't say consequences, but protections and options if we have an innkeeper that isn't a good member of our community and it is difficult. What recourse would neighbors who are having to deal with something that's not a good situation have? So it's very separate from you. I'm trying to be very clear. This is not about your business and your request, but what's great for our community, right? In the best possible case scenario, and unfortunately, in a worst case possible scenario, what makes for a good community? And I think that's good zoning, to think about what's a good rule in general, not what's a good rule knowing this particular owner, this particular business. And we're talking about that. So I totally hear where you're coming from, but try to keep it separate.
Yeah, I'd like to call it here because it seems like we're getting more into the debate of the definition as opposed to listening to what Carol has to say. If you have any closing comments or not.
I had a question. I don't think it got answered. Why specifically is this for an inn and not other businesses?
I can provide some history behind when we did this back in, I think it was 2017 when we first added this. We were seeing a large number of motels. We were looking at the Route 7 corridor in particular, from Virgins to Middlebury. There was a handful of, for lack of better terms, no-tell motels that had gone from their heyday to not very, and we did not want to see that occur in our community. So we wanted to make sure that there was some accountability in that situation. And so in all, either the inn or the B&B, there's an owner involved. And to make sure that larger organization usually has staffing at all times. So that was the rationale back in 2017 when we did that. So hopefully that helps.
It is required for a B&B's owner occupancy.
Well, I think the B&B here is defined as an owner. It usually is somebody's house. They have a couple fewer rooms and
It's 6 or less, I think is how it's
Yeah.
defined, and an inn is 12 or less, and then the hotel is more than that.
right.
And the B&B and the inn are owner occupied. Can you see a reason? Like, I don't see a strong reason to change it. What would be the reason to change it?
So,
I
we're
getting,
We're getting
Yeah, I'm
into
happy to
getting
not
into
have that
debate.
debate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we're getting into debate and this was public comment, so
yeah,
at risk of dragging this in further, I would ask that we
We've been
hold
20
off on
we've
debating
been 20
this.
minutes on public comment.
Yeah, that's fine. I would just flag for future
okay.
discussion.
I
Yeah.
was here as a
That
resource,
question
and
and
I'm happy
others.
to answer that question. I was coming as a resource as well as public comments because I understood that there was some question and it might be helpful to have somebody who's actually an innkeeper. Why is it bad? Because I think it makes it more difficult to be economically an economically positive thing for somebody to come in and, open an inn. I mean, it's, if you have to take one of your units and turn it into a living unit for a manager or for the owner, you are decreasing the income, which makes it less viable, economically viable to have in a small downtown.
I can see that, but I would also point out that it's also just as likely that the owner occupant benefits from, their shelter costs by being
Mhm.
resident in the.
Okay,
I don't
let's,
know, I can think of an objection to that, but
so if you want to hang around till we get to the point of discussing that further, you're welcome to, but I'd like
Okay.
to cut the comments and
Okay.
move along with the agenda.
Do you have any idea when that will be?
It's towards the end.
is it on the agenda?
Yes.
It is. Yeah,
So it
we
is-
usually end up about 8:45, so it would be
Mhm.
8:39, something like that.
Okay. All right, I'll hang around for a moment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, which is continuing to work the modernization grant work and with the overall review of the unified development regs. So this is our final meeting to review what we've done. We need to wrap up discussions in order to have public meetings, which are in process for November 7th and 21st. And we can see the light in the end of the tunnel. So the items that were raised at the round table on October 3rd are all part of the chair notes, which were distributed, and there's actually copies on the table if you want one. Priority, I mean, some of these issues are over and above or beyond what we need to do for grant requirements. The priority will be to settle on the grant requirements and hopefully get everything that's on the table decided. Again, let's have crisp conversations with proposed word changes, any area of concern. As the conversation drags on, it takes time, it's taken time out of some other thing that we were doing. I want to rely on Adam's wisdom. If we get into an arbitrary discussion, and then there's semantics about state regs and what we can do and what we can't do, or what's the meaning of some of the common verbiage with regards to state regs, that he will act as a final arbitrator tonight and hopefully move the conversation along so that we don't end up in a discussion about what the reg says and doesn't say. So with that,
Can I ask a quick question about the
Sure.
timing? What is the rush? I understand that there's
So we
some
talked-
discount on the,
we've talked about this, but we've got a grant commitment that has a forgiveness of the matching funds, which is insignificant, but the bigger issue, as far as I'm concerned, is we have a grant requirement that we wrap this up by the end of the month, and we've gotten a buy to actually have a vote if the select board agrees to at town meeting, but we've committed to have this done by the end of December. So in order to do that, we need to have our hearings as the planning commission in November, so select board can have their hearing in December and finish it off.
No, I understand.
So we've talked at length this has been going on for 2 years. We've talked at length. And some of the times, quite honestly, I'm not sure we used our time well through the process of, once we retain at Regional Planning Commission. But nonetheless, we're walking down this path and we're bumping right up against deadlines. And if we don't do it, yeah, okay, nothing happens. We're not going to jail. But the credibility of this planning commission and the town, as far as seeking grants, could be compromised.
And last night at the select board meeting, they were very clear that they would like this wrapped up so it can be, voted on by the population in March.
So they've decided to do it by the district, so yeah.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Kevin? And I'm sorry
Sure.
to, maybe be the neophyte here. But that my understanding was that the select board could have elected to vote on these themselves, but they have elected to take it to town meeting instead. Is that, I just want to make sure I understand the procedure.
That's fair. With S-100 or Act 47 or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
gave the legislative body the authority to approve them administratively as opposed to a vote. And
Last evening, they chose not to do that. They chose to have the public vote on them at town meeting day.
yeah, so it was an issue
Okay.
on the agenda last night.
That makes the urgency more comprehensible to me. I think before, I was like, well, wait a minute, if the select board can vote on this anytime, then what is the urgency other than the grant forgiveness, which I do understand. Every dollar counts, right? Like the matching would be forgiven if we met a certain deadline. And you have a fair point about the credibility, but this one, the fact that it has to make it to the town meeting deadlines, I understand with all the warnings and everything else. Thank you for clarifying. Thank you so much.
So I bring that up so we can have crisp conversations and move through what is a doable list that remains.
Okay. Actually, Chris, can we go to the map first? I revised the map from our last meeting. I want to make sure we get it right. It should be quick and it should be easy. And I want to make sure it's accurate, and reflects the decisions that you all made at the last meeting. So Chris is sharing it now. And go down to the last ones.
This is the last.
That is the last one. Okay, so it's a little hard to distinguish between the light blue and the darker blue. But let's see, you started off, you had HDR as kind of a buffer between your residential district and the village districts. At one point, you had decided to change that. At our last meeting, you decided to change a portion of that back, basically north of Plank Road. So we talked about basically changing it back north of Plank Road and the one large parcel south of Plank Road that Chris has his cursor on, if you can all see that now. So there were probably about 20 parcels impacted, and it basically goes, most of them go back to what currently exists now. So you reduce the scale or the increase in the HDR district.
So Rob, you were the one that I believe made the motion. Does that meet what you intended?
Yeah, that was what we had discussed and come to.
Anybody else have any comments? Okay,
Okay, great. Then we can move on. And where we left off last meeting was we were talking about basically duplexes, and specifically duplexes within the HDR district, and whether or not we should give a density bonus for duplexes, whether we should treat them with the basically as allowed in the same footprint as a single family unit, so in essence twice the density, or whether we should leave it the same. And that was kind of your homework that that all of you went home with, was to think about that so we could continue that discussion now. I will tell you, I was at a meeting for S100 today. Basically, it was a VLCT workshop this morning. And you know, this item is one of the items that they well, VLCT and the Agency of Commerce are a little up in the air about. And that is something that S100 says is that duplexes shall be treated basically the same as single family residents. They'll have the same dimensional requirements. The question came up, well, is basically a unit density the same as a dimensional requirement? And they did not have an answer for it. So they said, I mean, their answer was maybe. So you could certainly say S100 wants the density bonus to be the same for a duplex as for a single family. And I think Chris brought this up early on in our discussions as something that he felt might work for Bristol. Kevin had proposed just a 25% density bonus. As things stand right now, basically, your zoning bylaws work on a density per acre, and a unit per acre. So since duplexes have 2 units, they require twice as much land area under your current zoning as single family units.
So, any questions? So I'm not clear on, you said something about S100 said a duplex would have the same dimensional standards as a single family house. So does that mean
Setbacks have to be the same.
setbacks would be the same?
Frontage would be the same. Yes,
But the question
footprint
goes,
could be the same.
yeah,
The question could be, you know, would you include basically unit density as a dimensional requirement? And honestly, I come down on the side that says probably not. It's not a dimensional thing. The unit density is something separate, but there are towns that are interpreting it that way.
And it's tough too, because in our regs, we actually have it in the dimensional standards section.
It is part of your dimensional standards section.
but the other thing is that when we started out, we decided that we weren't going to do anything dramatic to HDR. Because there were some strong feelings that what we've got is working and let's just leave it alone. So if we change and say,
Duplexes would have the same, you could build a duplex on the same lot size as you could a single family residence. So in essence, you're doubling the density there. I think you could interpret S100 that way. I did not. I don't think unit density and dimensional requirements are necessarily the same thing.
I'm not clear on the question at hand. I mean, and what the result of one course of action is versus the other.
So we're talking about basically whether we're talking about duplexes, specifically just duplexes. And we're talking about the HDR district and whether or not you would like to give some type of density bonus for people to build duplexes. Kevin suggested 25%, I believe, at the last meeting. I just talked about H100. That's in essence a 100% density bonus, or you can leave it the same. So those are your 3 questions. Those are your 3 choices that are on
I
the
hate
table.
to, again, I'm gonna be the person, but I would really appreciate if we could have a concrete example. So if I have a half-acre lot in HDR and I have a single family home on it right now, if we were to make no changes, then you really can't replace my home with anything other than my home, a single family. If we made a change and we said, oh, yep, okay, like you could put a duplex there on the same footprint, or are we doing something in between? I would, a real life example would be really helpful to understand what it is we're actually trying to do.
You've said a half acre, and we've said
Yep.
HDR district. That basically allows 4 units per acre. So theoretically, under your existing zoning, you could put another single family home on basically your property, or you could turn your property into a duplex.
Or I could tear it down and build a duplex.
Sure. Yes.
I'm just playing with examples. Okay.
Yes.
And if I
If
had an
you-
acre, I could do 4 units in one, or I could do 2 duplexes or 4 single family homes in
Correct.
high density residential under our current regs.
That's correct.
Okay. So
If
how
you-
would this change it, this density bonus?
If the 25% density bonus would give you, basically, if you had that acre again, you go from being allowed 4 units plus a 25% density bonus, one additional unit. So with that acre, you could build 4 single family homes, 5 single family homes, 1 single family home, and two duplexes. That would be the 25% density bonus.
Could you do that if the density bonus is for duplexes only?
All right, you're right.
So I see it as kind of, it's a stepped question. Density bonus, yes or no? And then what is the density bonus and how is it applied? Whether it's 100%, 25% to the overall project, or just the second unit? Because there's a lot of options that we were throwing around last time and how it would be handled. So I think we need to decide density bonus for duplex, yes or no, or anything, and then go from there of what it is.
Okay, I think that's a helpful thought progression, if you all do.
Yes.
It's the percentage one is tough.
Yeah.
And again, I'm just looking at trying to calculate that out in the future.
Yeah.
So I'm not thinking about building. Because HDR is pretty well built out. I'm thinking about
The 4/10.
the house across the street from me. It's a big old Italianate, it's not the Bristol Palace, it's big old Italianate. And is sitting on less than half an acre. I don't know exactly what it is, but since it's sitting on less than half an acre, the only thing you can do with that house, which is large, is have a single family house. If you have a density bonus of, I threw out 25%, that gets you down to 0.4 acres. It gets you a whole lot closer to the size of existing lots with existing large houses on them in the village. So then, again, I don't know, but let's say that house across the street is sitting on 0.41 acres. So all of a sudden, if you had a 25% bonus, you could convert that to a duplex. Where otherwise, you're stuck with a single family house.
May I speak? We already have per force by S100, the ability to have an accessory dwelling unit on that property. So the 0.41 acre person could have another dwelling unit already. And since that house is not serviced by sewer, that is all they're really going to be able to do is have the 2. So giving a small dwelling, giving some sort of a change so that they could have a duplex would only allow them to have the same 2 units ultimately. Am I right or wrong?
The number's correct. The difference would be whether the ADU is only a third at most, if a third is more than 900.
And 1 bedroom.
And 1 bedroom, as opposed to if it's a 4-bedroom house, splitting it in 2 and having 2 2-bedroom homes.
So, yeah, there's no
Okay.
bedroom restriction.
Oh, that's right, that went away, I forgot.
But, so the other thing.
But just a minute, Kevin. So I'm just want to put my
Go
2
ahead.
cents in that I think that is actually a benefit, and it'll be the smaller unit would be more appropriate for people with lesser incomes, and I would like to somehow lean this, personally, I would like to lean this toward smaller units might fit better in the village, A, but B, would also be more comfortably affordable by people who are less wealthy. Okay, thank you. Sorry
So,
to-
to kind of trail on that, Slim, and I've been trying to figure out in my mind when the right time is to say this, but I was looking at Heinsberg's regs this week, and for an ADU, now we get back into bad term here, but for an ADU, they have a sliding scale, and your point may be the thing, and then just don't have a density bonus for duplexes. They had a sliding scale, so if your house was less than, let me see if I can find it. So if your house is less than 1,600 square feet, if your house is between 1,200 and 1,600 square feet, you can have an ADU 75% of the dwelling, or 900 feet. If your house is between 1,600 and 4,000, you can have a maximum size ADU of 1,200 square feet. If your house is over 4,000, you can have an ADU that's 30% of the principal dwelling. So they're stepping it. So in the case of the house next door that I referred to before, a 900 square foot ADU is not the best use of that house still. But if you allowed a 1,200 square foot ADU in there, it makes sense. And then maybe we don't battle the density bonus with duplexes.
Are
I'm not
there-
sure how that makes sense. And from my point of view, it just means an extra car, etc. And a little harder to afford. Anyway, that's me.
Are there dwelling sizes, the square footages, is that based off livable space or footprint? Like ours.
So they say size refers to livable floor area of the structure, i.e. areas that are finished condition heating. In other words, ADUs can have decks, garages, screen porches, etc. And these do not count towards the maximum size allowance. This is the Heinsberg reg.
Right, so they're single family home, if it's 2 stories, 800 square foot footprint, 2 stories would be 1,600 square foot.
Or do you
They would
include
be
basement?
based on, correct? In theirs,
In the living,
for the living spaces, each floor stack counts, right?
I think
Okay.
it'd be total living area.
What
Yeah,
if they have a
okay.
finished basement? That's, exercise room and TV room or
That's part
something.
of, that's finished space.
So that's 3 stories at that.
Potentially, I was just
Yeah.
looking at how they calculated that, because we do footprint, so.
So the state statute for, and we're a little off track.
Yeah.
State statute for ADUs basically says the greater of 30% or 900 square feet. What they did, those numbers basically mimic that and give you 900 square feet. So
But the nice thing about that is there is that plateau, if you will, on average size houses, that's 1,200 square feet.
Is this footprint or livable space again? I'm confused.
livable space.
Livable space, good. Thank you.
I think, so if somebody is on I'm just using your 0.41 acre lot, single family home. And for whatever reason, they tear it down, what can they rebuild there? They're not converting the house. They're choosing to tear it down and then they start again, so they get a duplex of up to what square footage if they're proposing to do that.
1.4 in the village, they couldn't do a duplex.
It's 5,000 square foot footprint maximum in HDR,
Footprint for,
But that's
principal
It's
structure.
a big house.
that's a huge house.
It's a huge
Yeah.
house.
And
So
I
they could-
would add on a follow-up question to that, which I think is sort of something that, again, I like real life examples. I think we also need to be considering then, and it's good to think about real life examples. How tall could that structure be? What's our height
35.
limit? So
35.
35 feet, right?
Basically 3
That-
stories and a peaked roof.
Yeah. So I think it's just something to consider, right? And I think John's question leads to sort of a question that I've been having all along is I'm excited to consider all of our draft changes. For me, in order to actually make an informed choice. Exactly what you guys have kind of been doing, Kevin, John, like coming up with an actual example in each of our zones and saying, what could happen on this lot, right? Not, change to existing, addition of an EDU, tear it all down and start over. For me, to make an informed choice for our community, I need to understand that better. Maybe that's a big ask. I hope it's something we could do relatively quickly, but I think that's what we all keep coming back to is, wait, what could you do there? Wait, what does that mean? What footprint, what square footage, right? And I think that's something that our voters are going to be very interested to understand as well.
So a real life example of a duplex on a small lot that really has minimal impact. There's one on Taylor Avenue. If you tee up Elm Street onto Taylor Avenue, it's the second, or come off Pleasant Street, it's the second house on the left. It was a single family home, it was split into a duplex. You would never know.
Yeah.
It's good.
No, that's, and I would say that's a nice example of village living. It's like they like their places, the neighbors, it all seems to work. I think my question is, what if the owner of that property tore that down? What could they rebuild there? And what would a 35-foot tall building look like there?
Yeah,
That's my question.
Houses in your village already.
Yeah. Yes. But there are different kinds, right?
Lots of different kinds.
Yeah.
Our tower in our house is a whole lot more than 35 feet.
For sure it is, Kevin, right? But you sit on some land, right? Your neighbors aren't super close. I want you to try and imagine that with our proposed setbacks, right? Where could you put that house? What would that feel like for a neighbor?
And the
It's a
tower,
consideration.
the tower, as nice as it is, I have a tower too, but it's not like a full residential floor.
I kind of want a tower, but
at full height.
Yeah.
But
So,
and
I
I don't
only offer that at this point, picking up on Slim, because if there is interest in doing a stepped ADU allotment, if you will, I'm not sure that, from my point of view anyway, and I'm the one that brought up the density bonus for duplexes, we set that aside and adopt a stepped ADU parameters like Heinsberg has.
So what you're doing is basically calling the question on the duplexes and saying, do you want to, and I'm gonna use Rob's example, do you want to give density bonuses for ADUs, or excuse me, for duplexes or not? And that was kind of the first half of the question, and then if so, what is it? So let's go to the first half of the question.
Okay, so do we need a formal motion or can we do this thumbs?
well, I still am wrestling with my own lack of understanding of how density bonuses work. And what the advantage, like, I'm still unclear on.
If you want
how it
people to
plays
build,
out.
if you want people to be able to build duplexes in your village, you will make it easier for them to build duplexes in your village by giving them a density bonus. It will help them overcome some of the constraints on lot sizes that you have. So right now in your HDR district, basically you get 4 units per acre. 4 units can be 1 multifamily, 4 units can be 2 duplexes, 4 units can be 4 single family residences. The question is, if you want to promote duplexes, you could give a density bonus for duplexes, making it easier for people to build a little denser within the village of Bristol. And there are lots of other considerations.
And the way that works, like a couple of quick questions, like, so somebody comes in, they've got X number of lot, 0.4 acres, whatever. They're not able to do it. You calculate the density bonus that they want to do a duplex, they want to create density. So, well, okay, the density bonus, it's really like they need less land to be able to do that. And that's
what the density bonus says right now.
Yeah, the language says, oh, you're adding something, but really you're making that necessary lot size smaller. That's part of where the confusion comes in, if you follow me.
I understand what you're
Right, so
saying.
don't density bonus, but actually, we're just saying you need less land
Yes,
to do this thing.
yes.
And is there not a more straightforward way of saying that in legislative language? Could we just reduce the lot size requirement? Would that be clearer?
You could say, basically, you could build duplexes on the same size lot as a single family resident.
And then the builder of the duplex, if, let's say they scoop off the existing house, they're starting from scratch, they're limited by the lot coverage regulations and the setbacks, of course, but so that limits, they can't go right out to the edge of the lot and have a giant duplex. Just because they're starting from scratch.
Right, they still have to abide by all of the other regulations that limit your single family dwellings as well.
Well, there aren't many, are there?
There are basically dimensional requirements.
Right.
So, the maximum principal structure size, is that when it's a duplex, is that the principal counts both units since it's in one structure, so it's still 5,000 square feet for a duplex or a single family home? A duplex does not get to be 10,000 square feet footprint because it's two
the
units.
structure, that's why we. use
No,
that
just for
terminology.
clarity.
All right, that
Same
helps.
with the multifamily.
Clarity is
It's
good.
the Structure size.
Okay. Gaining clarity, thank you.
So the question is, thumbs up, thumbs down on a density bonus, is that where we're at?
Density bonuses for duplex, should you be allowed to build a duplex on basically the same size lot as a single family resident, is one way to think of it. That's a 100% density bonus. This is a 25% density bonus.
And under state statute with these, we can review for parking. So duplex is gonna have some parking. It's essentially two driveways worth of living.
Two parking spaces.
Parking spaces.
So John is saying review.
Well-
So it's a permitted use, so it doesn't go before DRB. or-
Well, but towns are permitted to review for parking, right?
You can have parking regulations that allow for basically one spot per unit,
Which we currently have.
which you currently have.
So that would be something that the zoning administrator would look at to evaluate that permit. Request. So the question on the table and lacking the formality of motion, we'll do a thumbs up if we're in favor of a duplex density bonus, and thumbs down if you aren't
And right now, we're only talking about HDR.
in HDR. Okay,
Kevin, what percentage density bonus are we talking about?
we haven't decided that yet.
Oh,
If this passes, then we'll go there. If this doesn't pass, there's no need to.
I would
So the
support.
question is, any bonus at all, and then we'll figure out what it might be.
Yes.
So thumbs up, thumbs down. 1, 2, 3, 4,
Oh, go
5,
thumbs.
6, okay,
Can you see my thumb there? Yeah.
6,
So then the question is,
and we've got.
how significant a density bonus would you like to allow for duplexes in your HDR district?
Which is another way of saying how small a lot would you?
Yes, so I'd almost ask you, should you all be allowed to build a duplex basically on the same lot as a single family house?
I would say so. Makes it simple.
Yeah, I agree.
Simple is good.
So you're saying we could have 4 duplexes on an acre if we do that?
That's what the math on that one comes up to, yes. 25% would get you 1 extra on an acre.
So if you have a half acre lot, you could have 2 duplexes, 4 units.
Under the first scenario, yes. Under the second scenario, you might be able to get a duplex.
The first scenario being
100%. That's same,
100%.
same.
a 100% density bonus.
Yeah, you could have,
Next
you
one.
could have two duplexes on a half acre, four duplexes on an acre, two duplexes on a half acre. To answer your question.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
you're talking about one single family dwelling and one duplex on the half acre. The next choice. Is that correct? 3 units instead of 2?
With the
Because it'd
25%, yes.
Yes,
Quarter acre per duplex.
Sounds like a lot to me, but
Yeah, all of a sudden you're 8 units per acre.
Yeah, it does. That gives me some
I
pause.
mean, that goes back to where, I mean, my thoughts were just bump it to 5 units per acre for HDR, no matter what they are.
yeah, but it's the problem with that is we're changing the density in HDR where we at one point were very. Very serious, or we didn't want to change the character and that going to that 5. You know, change the character as opposed to going to a duplex. I believe it's just me, and I've said it before. With these bigger, older houses in the village, they're prime for more than a single family house, and we haven't done anything yet to affect that.
Well, they're also primed for knocking down and building as much as the law allows, which is something that's happening everywhere else in the country, but here. And even in Chittenden County, it's happening that close, but here it hasn't quite gotten there yet. But that's what goes on. I would note that for me, like if you were saying you could put 2 duplexes on a half acre lot, 4 units. I think multifamily, which is a 4-unit thing, right? For habitations. And I would just note that according to our prior conversations, we've gotten to the point where in HDR, just looking at HDR, multifamily dwelling is a conditional use. So it does bother me a little bit when you think about the density of, say, 2 duplexes, 4 units anyway on that. And just being something that gets 0 review. So, I mean, if a duplex is a duplex, talks about the structure, but like, we want to talk, I mean, we talk about uses on the property, and there's like some, 4 uses that are 4 residential uses, or 4 residential uses, whether it's under 1 roof or 2 roofs or 4, it's still 4. And with the anticipated impacts similar. So I understand that the state of Vermont doesn't want us to regulate single family and duplex housing. So I'm worried about a back end kind of run around our multifamily situation if we create where you could have 4 units. You just call them you just make 2 duplexes instead of a multifamily. So that I'm not quite at peace with that.
So let's go around the table and shoot out a number and see if we're sort of thinking the right. We're centering on a percentage of bonus. Does that make sense?
yes.
So Rob, what do you think?
I think to apply a bonus for duplexes would be considered a density of 5 units per acre, which means for 1 duplex, you would need 0.4 acres. Flat. Otherwise, you get into how is it applied, you just have a different density. Because it works out that clean, that it's 0.4 acres
For
duplexes.
as a percentage, or would just say 0.4?
0.4 is the 25%.
Or basically, it works out slightly differently. You do, depending on how you apply the 25%, is it to the second unit or to the overall project? That's where we were getting hung up before. So I don't like the idea of having different densities for different things, but it is clean in the end. At 5 units per acre for duplexes. Duplexes require 0.4 acres to build one. Or you just say duplexes require 0.4 acres
Per duplex,
per duplex.
so 0.8 if you want to, or more.
Right.
Well, it'd be 0.9, right? No,
No, 0.8.
Oh, okay, so you go from 0.5 to 0.4 and just say if you're gonna build a duplex, you can cite that on 0.4 acres.
That's my thought. And then it's not a dramatic step. You're not going to 6 units per acre or 8 units per acre. You're adding one more in there, but it does meet that requirement of all those 0.4 blank acre lots within the village that seem like they're plenty big enough compared to some of the ones that 0.51. If you have one that's 0.46, doesn't seem like that much difference and why you can or can't do it.
But if you're 0.36, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
For even one duplex.
Yep.
But there's always gonna be a line somewhere.
Yeah.
No, I'm not averse to some lines, but I'm just making it clear.
Yeah.
Okay, Slim, what do you think?
I like that. I like 0.4. That sounds great.
You're a
Very
0.4
clean.
guy? Shannon, what do you think?
I agree with Rob on that. That's a way cleaner way to follow through with all this. It's a clean line.
Bill, what do you think?
I like Rob's idea.
And then John?
I like it. It does address my concerns for, just people shoehorning all kinds of stuff in. I would add, that, I'd like to see us, and I think we'll address this later, so I'm not gonna harp on it, but, I'd like to be able to see, in the case of a property owner that creates one duplex, that they might also have a path to having an ADU as well. So that would be a third minor unit on the property.
Gotta be owner occupied.
That's what we do.
And that would then allow, under certain conditions that they could be met, for a little slightly more density, on a smaller scale and, alleviate the concern that I have of insensitive densifying development done by people who don't actually live here.
Anna, what do you think?
I like that it was simplified to something that's clear that a property owner could understand. 0.4 equals duplex possible. So I'm on board with that. I think that makes a lot more sense than talking about a bonus or anything else. Is that, hey, this is how it is. If you have 0.4, guess what you can do? If you have 0.3, nope. 0.5, different rules, but that makes it nice and clean.
Okay, thanks. So
At the user end.
Quick question for Adam, just to clarify, so out of village lots, I know you went over this, I just don't remember, but are most 0.4 and above? I forget how that sort of breaks out. You don't have to go through the super details, just rough memory, like where does 0.4 land us in this sort of
I would tell
HDR
you
zone?
probably in your HDR zone, most of your units were between a third of an acre and half an acre. So there are gonna be basically winners and losers.
Yeah. I mean, the traditional village lot, when the village was created, were quarter-acre lots, is what the vision was. But there are a bunch of double lots out there, and like mine's 0.4, and it's.
Well, there were quite a few 1 acre lots
Yeah.
too,
So there was a study that Chris and I did a while ago, looking at duplexes and multifamilies, and if you don't have it handy, I can forward that.
That'd be great.
To you.
Thank you. I do remember I have a recollection of discussing sort of where the curve is for lot size, but it's just not fresh.
It's not, it is not methodical, it's just kind of like hit or miss or where we thought.
Yeah, you kind of counted them up and see what the distribution was, and the 4 is sort of at the top of the bell curve. Is that fair enough? Just a 0.4 rather, it's sort of.
It's
that
probably
zone.
pretty close to the top of the bell curve. It's up there. It's not down here, that's for sure.
So I would only raise one question based on that. Is there any sense to having it slightly under 0.4? I don't know, you landed on 0.4, I could be happy with that, but.
It was the cleanest way I could think of to do it and get a bonus and help out at least a portion of increasing the density. And then as you go to smaller lots, there's more impact that, that's gonna be one of the consequences of that. As you go to the smaller lot, you're not gonna be able to avoid those potential impacts to the neighbors that everyone is sensitive to.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I would only say that I'm at peace at 0.4, and I'm love to consider maybe a little bit less, but
Okay, let's move on.
Can I
And
just
every-
give everybody a wonderful resource, just in case if you're curious about this? Go check out the parcel viewer from the state of Vermont. It's maps.vcgi.vermont.gov/parcel viewer. You can look up any parcel in the village and get its acreage. That's how I know things that I know. So it's super helpful for me to visualize all of this.
Yeah, for my interactive
I'm
maps,
happy to, yeah. If it's appropriate, I can put that link in the chat. You can grab
that'd be
it.
great.
Could you send that link to me, Anna, and we'll or send that link to you?
Cool.
Send that link to Chris and he'll put it in the minutes.
Okay, you got it. Will do.
Thank you.
It's a great resource.
yeah, and I use Vermont interactive maps, which is another great one that the state of Vermont maintains.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna say we've resolved that question and the question of density bonuses. Basically below for affordable housing. So I'm gonna move on to section 404 ADUs. And I guess, Chris, I'd like to put this one up on the screen, because you all, when we did this probably 6 months ago at this point, you all made some changes to your existing regulation. Section 404. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. There we go. So
Yeah.
okay, so section 404. At least a portion of it so far is up on your screen. There is more, but we'll get to that in a minute. First thing you did was took as defined it as an efficiency or 1-bedroom apartment. You took that out, basically statute took that out last year. So you're mimicking the state statute. So that's something that we recommended you do. It's what you should do. For the purposes of this section, clearly subordinate shall mean. So if you basically look at the paragraph above, and about the middle of it, it says within or appurtenant to an owner occupied single family dwelling unit that is clearly subordinate to a 1-family dwelling and has facilities, blah, blah, blah. You all chose to define clearly subordinate more in depth than the state statute does. So the state statute just says clearly subordinate. You all said, well, what does that mean? And how do we account for that? So we added a section 3 for the purposes of this section. Clearly subordinate shall mean that the accessory unit does not exceed the greater of 30% of the total habitable area, floor area of the main single family dwelling, or 900 square feet. We changed it from 1,000 to 900 because 900 is what's in the statute, and given that there wasn't that much of a difference, it was easier to follow the statute. Let's see, the accessory dwelling unit shall have a lesser number of bedrooms than the main single family dwelling unit. New construction shall be set back from the front property line at least 20 feet greater than the main single family dwelling unit. So it's going to be back from the road a little bit. It's going to have a less of a visual impact. New construction shall have a height of at least 20% less than the main structure. So again, clearly subordinate, basically it's set back a little more. It's got a smaller height, at 20% less height. So if it were 35 feet, let's say the main one was 35 feet, which is your maximum. If we take 20% off that, that should get me 7 feet off 28 feet. Let's see, and then the last one, new construction, you shall use design features and materials compatible with the main single-family dwelling. That one may be a little hard to enforce, but after some back and forth as to what exactly that meant and whether or not it should be in there, I think that was the compromise that we settled on, at least at that time.
I thought that had been stricken. Unless I could admit, I
That was
missed
from
one.
my recollection, but that doesn't, I forget. I have like different views of stuff on a daily basis. So, I thought we had
I know
taken it
you,
out because it's basically not enforceable. So what does Chris do if this rule isn't, or a zoning administrator do if this rule isn't followed?
Or if they bring in a design, it's arbitrary to that person. To what they feel is compatible.
Well, the other thing is this more restrictive since there's not a material restriction on single family home and duplex? New ones?
so the answer is, you're using the statutory language of clearly subordinate.
Yeah.
And you're trying to define what makes it clearly subordinate. And I think the logic here is that if it's the same materials and the same design, let me use the language, design features as the single family home, and it's also smaller, that's going to contribute to its being clearly subordinate. Where if it's, you've got an old Victorian house in Bristol and you put up a steel box, without any Victorian type design features or very different materials, that may stand out more than,
You mean like Kevin's house?
I don't know Kevin's house.
Kevin's is a Victorian with a square box garage.
So yeah, what is, so what
With,
if you,
with oil treated siding versus a pastel
Painted.
blue painted siding.
I'm not really comfortable, attempting to shape or dictate. I think we're not dictating here, but it's hard, design features and materials. I'm just a little wary of going in that direction, and so I'm not comfortable with E at all. And as far as A goes, I would want to say that excludes the basement. Because I think
it's livable.
Wait, well, I think what this is trying to get at is the size of the structure that to be proposed, and the basement's underground. It doesn't contribute to our sense of the size of the building. So I would favor saying in this instance, that we say excluding the basement in A.
John, I think I tried to mimic the state statute in that, and it talks about habitable, basically, area, and if you've got a habitable basement, you've got a habitable basement, and I can't change that.
so do
So,
we,
I'm
we
not
say
trying to fight that
habitable
apart.
space?
Yes, which is different
Okay.
than the footprint of our zoning.
Is a closet habitable space?
So Ferrisburg zoning, I wish I had it up in front of me. They base it on the same standards that the listers would use. When if the listers are looking at a structure, like 4-foot knee walls are where the beginning of habitable space begin, and there's a whole set of standards that listers use. And that's what they utilized in Ferrisburg.
Yeah.
I don't know what those are off the top of my head.
So if we don't do that, if we don't have some way, I mean, this is attempting, clearly subordinate is about the overall impact of this structure, right?
Mhm.
Including its overall bulk and size and height and that sort of thing, right? So, like if we're like suddenly we're allowing 1/3 larger structures because we include the basement. And what if somebody's, we're not supposed to be discriminating against people here. We're supposed to be fair housing here. What if somebody has a lot of money and they finish their basement and spend all that money to do that, and somebody has the same basement next door in the same house, but doesn't have that money? They're discriminated against by something that includes the basement. So I don't know how we resolve that, but
Finished basements are fairly common, particularly in newer houses. My house would never support a finished basement.
I get that, but
So-
understand the impact. If we're including basements, finished or otherwise, I don't know why we can't say. A basement shop that's not particularly finished, but I go down there and work isn't habitable, but suddenly the basements come into play. A 2,000 square foot house is a 3,000 square foot house, and the rules are, now it's.
So they'd get an extra 100 feet in your example, because it's the greater of 1/3 or 900 square feet. So with your 1,000 foot basement in your example, they get an extra 100.
300 square feet, 30%, right? 30%.
As I read it, it's so if they go from a 2,000 square foot to a 3,000 square foot, right?
I see, and they go from 900 to 1,000 being allowed.
It's not a huge difference.
And then. it is
30% of
access.
3,000 is 900,
Right.
so they'd be at 900 or 900.
30% of 3,000 is 1,000.
No, that's 33%.
3%.
That's a
Yeah.
third,
Right.
so 30%
You're
is
using round
900,
numbers, right?
yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the statute basically references the habitable, the greater of the habitable. I want to make sure we're mimicking
I
it.
believe it
but I'm-
does. I read it today.
Can
So-
we scroll up just a little bit so I can read all of A, because I'm missing the first sentence that would be really great. 30% of total habitable or 900, okay.
And if that's what the statute says, I would really encourage us to use it here so that we're basically saying the same thing.
What if somebody proposes a garage and an ADU?
Which is not uncommon.
Sure.
Yeah, so their ADU could still be 30%. Or the greater of 30% or 900 of their house. It'd be measured on the habitable feet of their house, not the garage. So they could put it above the garage.
And then the
And-
structure would be limited by the accessory building size of the zone.
Yes. Yes, which can be pretty large, honestly.
But at that point, in Bristol, we don't have a recourse if somebody proposes those two uses right now in our regs.
Yeah, you have to meet the building, so you're confusing physical and use. The structure itself can be up to 1,000 square feet, 35 feet tall, 1,000 foot square footprint, 35 feet tall. And whether you use it for a garage, an apartment.
That's another use.
Those are the uses, correct. The structure is the shell. And so whatever the shell is, then what you put inside of that shell, each of those uses have to be a permitted use or a conditional use or a site plan use. So if in that same structure, you wanted to have the downstairs as your personal wood shop and the upstairs as your ADU, they would both have to be allowed, and they would both have to meet, the ADU has to meet these standards. The wood shop can take up as much of the remaining space as it wants, because there's no restriction.
But we don't have a path forward for that right now, do we?
What do you mean?
Somebody comes and proposes these two new uses. I want a new
Yeah, but-
garage and a new ADU. What do? Because that's two uses. That's not just an ADU.
So with the path forward now, because of Garfield, we might as well just speak of the big elephant in the room and just say it, is that the garage gets built first. That qualifies. Once it is done, they then can come in and ask for the use separately. There's no longer, they're two separate permits.
So I don't want to talk about that particular one. I'm looking for similar instances. Like,
So I have a great instance. Hannah Lucarelli built one on Pleasant Street. Tore down an existing garage, rebuilt it. The downstairs is her garage. Now she built that, and then she came back and she applied for an ADU for the upstairs, which she built second. That's exactly how we want to see it work, and that's exactly how it did work. Right?
no. I
So
don't
to be
think so.
clear, I want to, just so I understand that use case as well. Is that the garage was approved as a 2-story building with just empty space above, unfinished, and the garage below.
Yeah.
And then there was an application to say, actually, I want to convert that existing unused, unfinished space into an ADU.
Correct.
And then that was approved.
Correct.
So obviously, and this is gonna be a little complicated, right? But no one in their right mind, if they're planning on doing both, is going to entertain that project if they don't think they're gonna have approval for the second. Because the second requires septic, among other things, right? And can my septic
Right.
system handle this? Am I gonna get a septic permit? So there's obviously that, to me, never mind my neighbor across the street, like as the use case, right? It's like that to me would seem like a disincentive. It's like, well, I'm gonna take a chance on this building. I may or may not get approval. I
So
want to
I'm-
do X, but I don't know that I can do X because the regs say, well, do one first, finish that, and then come back when that's finished, apply again. Have I interpreted that correctly?
That is currently how I recommend people do it, to ensure that the structure that they want to convert a portion or all of into an ADU is a legal structure, is a legally permitted structure.
So we're talking about uses, but really the use is it's a single family unit. And you can put an accessory dwelling unit on there or building on there that's permitted. It's still a single family use unit. You can put an ADU anywhere you want, including building something. It's still a the use is still single family unit. So depending on what the sub-use is, to me, doesn't make sense that we're carrying these things out because it's kind of semantics. It's all single family unit use.
It's not really, I mean, in the past, as I've said, a new accessory structure was viewed as a separate thing. So why is it not now?
It still is. They still need to get a separate permit for a permitted accessory use.
And if somebody
building or use.
And if somebody's proposing to build both at the same time, they don't have an option to do that. Because that would violate the state doesn't address that. Bristol doesn't address that, so they can build anything they want in that instance if they're proposing both. Because we, here in Bristol, we don't have a regimen to deal with that circumstance, although we used to. Because
I'm not sure I follow what you're saying, they can't do.
So if they come, it used to be once upon a time until the last revision of the regs that if somebody wanted to build an ADU, if they were proposing to put it on top of a new accessory structure, it would need conditional use approval. What's the problem with that?
Well, we can't do that
Doesn't
legally.
allow it.
We can, because why can't we do that legally?
So so listen to Adam.
The state doesn't allow it. If you're building an accessory, if an accessory dwelling unit can only be regulated the same as a single family use. So if you're not making single family uses conditional, you can't make an accessory dwelling use
But
conditional.
in this instance, the state is not, where in the legislative in the statutes, does it say an ADU and another use? The ADU doesn't, it's just an ADU, right? It's not an ADU in a garage,
So
right?
let me read your
Or a
accessory building or use, and this is coming from Bristol zoning regulations currently. A building or use incidental, subordinate, and reasonably necessary to the conduct of the principal structure or use. Accessory building or use does not include any building or portion thereof used for living purposes.
Correct.
So Chris,
So it stands alone.
so Chris is saying, come in, get an accessory building permit, basically. Once you have an accessory building permit, if you want an ADU, you can basically come in for that
But
permit.
then it seems like that's an end run around
No, it's
what we're
not.
trying to do here, which is deal with circumstances where somebody's packing it in, you know?
But ADUs are kind of a pack in
That's what they're
use.
for.
I mean, they're to carve out a section of an existing home or an unused portion of a garage as a living area that wasn't used before. And in your example, I'm getting a little confused as to why that would be any different than if somebody built their floor of living of their main new single family home above a garage, because that's multiple uses in the same instance as you're using it. That would be then a conditional use because there's more than one use inside that one structure. So if a garage is attached to a home that's different than a single family
I
home?
think it says new accessory structures or what I'm trying to deal with.
We got a lot,
Yeah,
So
so
we do, so I'd like to make a motion then that we add the language of the 2017 bylaws omitted from the 2020 revisions on section 404 back into section 404. If you look at that, I think it would be more permissive than the state because it contemplates situations that the state would shut down. So for example, if somebody comes and says,
can you read them and we'll?
yeah, I'd be happy to read it. I have copies if you want to read along. I have a few copies. I'm sorry I didn't email it to everybody else. One sec. Um, you want to take a moment to absorb this?
I don't need a copy.
I would ask that you put it on the record, please.
Please email me a copy of your then.
We'll do that. When you absorb it, let me know.
You wanna read it for everybody that doesn't?
Yeah, oh, yes.
It's not-
Shall I read it? Yes, so if you look at the current section 404, and then you, back in 2017, it used to continue, and it said, any accessory dwelling unit, new or existing, that meets the above conditions is a permitted use in all districts, no problem. However, any new accessory dwelling unit or revision to an existing accessory dwelling unit requires a conditional use permit if it results in, 1, a violation of any of the conditions above, 2, a new accessory structure, or 3, an increase in the height or floor area of the existing dwelling, or 4, an increase in the dimensions of the parking areas, and 5, neither unit is owner occupied. So in my mind, so anyway, my motion is to adopt this exact language that was excerpted from the 2017 bylaws back into our regs.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion. So I would ask Adam, of these 5 conditions, how many are they all within what the state allows in the statute or not?
I don't think so. I don't think you can do it. I think basically the Home Act said that you have to, if you're permitting a single family dwelling unit in an area, then you have to, you can't make an accessory dwelling unit subject to any more conditions than that single family unit.
If that's all it is.
It doesn't say if that's all. it is.
Nothing in the
That's-
legislation says ADUs and garages, right? It just says ADUs, right?
I wouldn't go there. You
But
all have. the
But it
choice,
doesn't
but
make,
I
it
don't-
doesn't set any more.
But Adam,
Direction.
with all due respect, just because you wouldn't go there,
I
if
don't, I
if the
don't think it's
language
legal.
doesn't
I
say
think this
that,
would violate the statute. Honestly,
It's
I
more
would never
permissive.
recommend this.
It's more permissive than statute. For example, number 1, under the language I propose adding, a violation of any of the above conditions. One of those above conditions would be the building is already a duplex. So under the state rules and under Bristol's regs as they stand today, somebody comes, applies for an ADU on a property that already has a duplex, they're out of luck, dead end, they have no path forward. If we added this language, then maybe they could have an ADU, but they just have to go through and see what everybody says about that. Maybe there's a way to make it a fit. They
So-
can have a conditional use permit and go forward. Another example, just another example. Somebody comes along and says, I want to build a new ADU and a new garage as part of one building. Because you guys don't see that the garage as something that, I guess it doesn't need a permit, it's just something that can be done. It
No,
does
it-
need a
it does
permit, but
need
it gets
a
an administrative permit, but it's still a permit. In this instance, if you notice the language, number 2, we would have had a way forward for that person on Garfield Street if he had come and proposed a garage and an ADU, because number 2 says you can't do it unless if you have a new accessory structure, you can get it if you have a conditional use permit. That to me is more permissive. It allows a way forward for that guy and might get another ADU built. That's more permissive than the state. And same with owner occupied. Maybe there's a scenario we could see where somebody could do that. I'm not sure I'm a big fan of that one, but as the whole thing, I mean, I don't see how the.
Okay, so
That's how I see it.
So I just want to clarify one thing, the single family, you said a duplex would be allowed. Based on the definition of the first half of 404, it very clearly states that it's part of a single family home. So thus the conditions wouldn't be met for a duplex.
That's what I'm saying. So if somebody already has a duplex, this would be more permissive. It would
No,
allow them to
No,
go.
it would,
It would, because if they have a duplex that exists,
so I'm gonna.
where
call-
they're locked out because it's not a single family home, they can't have an ADU.
in accessory.
This would say, here's a path
So
forward.
the 2017 regs in front of me, it says an accessory dwelling unit shall be defined as an efficiency or one bedroom apartment located within or adjacent to an owner occupied single family dwelling.
Right, but and that doesn't,
So,
Okay, so we're gonna call the question. What do you have any comments, Rob? Or I'm not gonna call the question. I wanna go around for comments and then we'll vote.
I don't think we should make it a conditional use, because the number one of a violation of, you lay out the definition and then having something that says, if you don't meet any of these, you can still do it, it's a conditional use. You're basically calling most of it a conditional use then and allowing it everywhere. I don't think that that's a good practice, or that just gets really muddy really fast. I don't think we should roll back to that. That's my thought.
Slim?
I'm a little confused on this one. I'm still thinking. Thank you.
Shannon?
I'm still a little confused also, but I feel like it's muddying the waters.
Bill?
I believe we should leave it as is.
Anna?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. My apologies. I think about the application process. And if we're trying to encourage accessory dwelling units and trying to get more housing in our village, the fact that you have to start a project, stop it, and go reapply, if you want to do, what happened across the street here, or what was proposed, but then not really a possibility on Garfield. I think that if it were possible legally to include it, that would be great. I will defer if in fact we feel like, oh, well, if we include this, then, we're violating the statute, but I'd like to hear more about that if in fact that's the case.
You wanna embellish that at all?
Yeah, well, the Home Act was just passed. Basically says that if you permit a single family residence in an area, that you also have to permit ADUs, and that the conditions upon which you permit them cannot be any more restrictive than the single family residence. So for example, you could not make an ADU a conditional use if the single family residence is not a conditional use. I really think it's very cut and dry.
well,
Okay, so we'll vote.
well, I haven't had my say. You went
You
around and get
presented the
called.
question.
I did, and I'd like to conclude.
Okay, conclude.
If this provision that I'm recommending had been in place when the Garfield Street thing happened, you would have had guidance. You said in public hearing that you didn't have guidance. This would give guidance. It would prevent that from happening right now, because this is a limit. This is no longer in our regs. That opened the door to what happened on Garfield Street, where nobody's happy. Property owner's not happy, the neighbors aren't happy, the town shouldn't be happy about it. And yet it's a huge loophole, a lesson we can learn from that we could close with this language.
All right. So let's vote. So the motion on the floor, if I understand it, the motion on the floor is to adopt these 5 criteria that John brought up and discussed. So if you're voting yes, you're voting to adopt it. If you're voting no, you're voting to not adopt it. So all those in favor say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
3. Those opposed?
No,
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 So how many no's have we got?
3.
I think you got three in
Bill,
Bill.
Shannon, myself, Shannon, myself.
So, how did we end up with that?
You just 6.
6, okay. So I need to vote on it. I'm not in favor of it. Cause I am concerned that, these things limit the ability to get a permitted use, so the vote is 4-3.
Again,
Which is,
Again. Well,
it's not a full,
well, if it's got 3 things for it, the change isn't gonna pass, but you also have not necessarily said, yes, we'll accept what's written in here, the changes that are written in here, and let's move on. So
Do
that
we
would-
need
that would be
a,
your
do we
next-
need a motion, or can we agree? I think everybody there, I thought there was a majority against leaving E in there, but I didn't really hear anything else on any of the other.
so do we need a
Stuff.
motion to omit E then? Or thumbs up, how you wanna do it, you wanna get formal or not?
I don't think we need to. Is anybody in favor of keeping E in the language for ADU definition?
I am,
You are?
I am,
Is-
and even if it's not. It just at least sends the message that we would appreciate some consideration aesthetically that would fit into the neighborhood. Now, can this be broken by a lawyer or something? I don't know. But I think most people probably want to get along and do, they're good village citizens, and this would remind them to be compatible with their neighbors, and so that they're being good neighbors. So I don't see a problem with it. It just says compatible. I mean, I know it's very vague, but it can only help, in my opinion. Doesn't mean we have to be Woodstock or someplace, it's just compatible, meaning not incompatible.
So
I
is
can see
anybody
your
else?
point, Slim. I can see your point, Slim, that it, although not enforceable, I mean, I can't see how anyone could enforce this. This is really a matter of taste and opinion. But to a kind-minded individual, they might read that and say, oh, okay, they're asking me to think about putting something in that looks like it could have been there, fits in, however they interpret that word compatible. I would have voted to take it out, but I can see your point. I don't think it does any harm in the sense that it is not enforceable.
It's litigation bait, is my point on this. This is, if somebody does not like a project, this gives them the loophole they're looking for litigation to stop the project. That's my only concern with it. They don't like deciding you're putting on the project. They can say that it's in, I mean, it's arbitrary. If you want to say it has to match, I'm good with that, because that's enforceable. This arbitrary feel good stuff, that's not zoning.
Yeah,
So who'll make a motion on it? Cause I'm getting.
I'll make a motion that we remove E from the definition there.
I'll second it.
Okay, John, you get the honor. Any discussion? Any additional discussion that we haven't covered? Okay, we'll move it to a vote. All those in favor of removing it, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
I,
Okay, those opposed? One opposed. Okay. Whoa, do you have anything else about ADUs?
Okay, I'm gonna assume we're ready to move on. Unless I hear differently from you.
What's next?
Okay. Let's see. Next we get to hotel in this facility definition, then business yard definition. So are you gonna share that, Chris? Yes.
Into it right now.
Okay.
There it is.
So, we've discussed this a little bit. Whoop, that's hotel.
Oh, sorry. There it is.
Go. Okay, at the meeting that we discussed it, basically we did not come to any conclusions. The board asked Anna and myself to try and create a definition that we felt would work in the best interest of the town of Bristol. This is the definition that we came up with at that time. Anna, would you like to say anything?
I think we had a pretty thorough discussion, and I think going back and forth about, whether or not, how would you demonstrate, right? And I think that we're hoping that with this language, it's clear that there is actually someone on staff, and that information is accessible, open to ideas. Obviously, I appreciate that the word demonstrate and the word timely might be open for debate. But this is sort of where we landed.
Conditional use. Across the board. I'm sorry.
Don't remember.
That is one of the things that we did do, Adam, right? Is that we said, yep, we're gonna do this. And that the compromise is that it's a conditional use everywhere that it's permitted, right? Where you can have an inn and guest facility, we were gonna change it to say it is a conditional use, and that's the compromise.
Yes, that is correct.
And that way the demonstrate, right, will come up
Okay.
in that conditional use process of, well, how are you going to demonstrate that you have this person? Oh, well, we're going to post a sign here, and we have a QR code there, right, and a number you can text, or however you're going to do it, right? And then timely can be a topic of discussion with anyone who decides to come to that hearing.
So if you look at the use chart on page 14, we did propose that in the village business district and in the HDR district, it go from a site plan to a conditional use. It remained a site plan use in the commercial district.
Commercial is the same as village business, or is that?
No,
No, that's C1, that's on
That's
the,
C1,
yeah.
okay.
predominantly outside of the village, but planning area.
I mean, it's a fair point to say it could consider having it be a conditional use everywhere that it's allowed, and then it's consistent.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I think we've given all too much thought to the benefits of not having a resident manager or owner manager. I think there are a lot of benefits to having one. And that includes people who want to, giving people a stake in where they live. That people who want to be in the place they want to do business, which I respect very much. And to me, this feels a lot like spot zoning. It just feels like there's nothing that recommends this except one request to do it. I don't think we've bumped into any other problem with it anywhere else. And I'm concerned that non-resident, distant owners may not be as attentive to the needs of the neighbors in downtown Bristol. And so I think that would be a rationale to keep it as it is.
I hear your concerns, John. I think that there's different ways to have that stake or provide that level of assurance that everybody's looking for. And I could see the economic impact of having to be owner occupied as opposed to simply having somebody on staff at all times. Doesn't take up a lodging spot to have somebody working a desk, theoretically. And I get that there's cost implications to that too, but far less for if you're a lodging facility losing a lodging compared to that,
Losing a lodging but gaining a home. I think, how do you compare those expenses or
Yeah.
costs and benefits?
well, is it just one lodging spot if you wanna make a home with a family, say, is one lodging spot going to be large enough, or will you have to take out more than that and not? I couldn't live in one lodging spot as a family of 4, without losing my mind.
Right, I don't know, well, I mean, we have only one advocate for this
So-
from the outside, how would it affect?
So I think
You.
that just to reel that back a little bit, John, we should be looking, as Anna had said, and I alluded to, very lofty when we took public comments, we should be looking globally. We're not looking at a case specific rule to make a case specific rule, and we need to be looking at this globally as to what makes sense for the town.
Is this potentially a hindrance to new businesses coming in?
Yes,
Why is that?
because when you're not gonna be, no one is gonna be building an inn downtown, a new building in downtown Bristol. They'll be converting a current building to that. That's what we did. It was an apartment building and we converted it to 7 rooms and suites. It's not, so you're limited in space. It's gonna have to be a small property, a small inn. It's not gonna be a big hotel or anything. And if you, I think the unintended consequence of this is that you will make it more difficult for people to create inns out of apartments. I mean, it's close. I mean, we could change it back to apartments. And I said, well, there's more housing, that's a good thing. But the inn brings a lot of people into Bristol who spend a lot of money. The restaurants, the stores, it's a good economic stimulus to have in downtown Bristol. I think you mentioned that people have to live in the B&Bs. Have you noticed there's no B&Bs? It's not economically viable anymore to have, because they're living there and they have 1 or 2 units, but if they could turn the whole thing into an inn, it might make it viable. You said there's only one person who's bringing us up. It's because, well, there's only one inn in town. And the other people probably aren't reading this or don't understand the impact for the future. That, you may be limiting, we're not gonna be doing this forever. We're gonna be retiring, and I think I'd like to see the inn continue, and it has a higher probability of continuing if you don't require somebody to live there.
So you mean easier to sell for you?
Probably, yeah, it would be easier to sell.
Sounds like spot zoning to me.
Well, the owners of the Tillerman. also
Can I
assume-
interject something important, which in the conversation, just for
Well,
context?
Chris, can you wait? Chris was gonna say something. Can you wait until Chris is done, please?
So the owners of the Tillerman currently, were hoping to break their house and the business into 2 separate parcels. But they aren't able to do that. Because then it violates the in rules that they would have to be in-house. So they've been forced to keep and this was from an insurance standpoint, so there's a lot of reasons to allow it to be separate. This was just another example, you wrote for another example of where it may be viable. And those are owners that are planning on staying. So that's my 2 cents.
Well,
Sorry, Anna, can you?
Again. Go ahead, sorry, I thought it was gonna be my turn, I apologize.
It is.
Yeah, Anna, it's your turn.
Okay, so I think that it's important if we're really gonna be thinking about this, not as spot zoning, right? But really thinking about all the applicability of all of this. We need to consider that this is something that would be either site plan or conditional use in many districts, right? If you look at the chart, it's the majority. And so it could very well be a scenario where this could actually be an incentive for someone to be like, oh yeah, score, I can actually do this now, right? And I don't mean that like someone's coming in with a business, So I think we need to look at it from all the perspectives, not just at two existing businesses and how it's impacting them. I'm not dismissing that. But I think that is considering two particular individual known cases with known operators and owners, as opposed to the theoretical 10 years from now, what could we do? So I just want to advocate for whatever we decide needs to be something that is going to function now and with an unknown new business owner who might actually want to build something new and not live here, but live in Burlington. That could be okay, but I think we need to look at what does that mean? Those key words about demonstrating the manager, right? And timely manner. Those are the key things to me, not the Wells family and the owners of the Tillerman, with all due respect to them.
So we can let's take some closing comments and then let's move to action on it.
Could I just make a comment
Sure.
about the spot zoning? In some ways, it seems like this isn't really zoning at all, but you're kind of getting into business management. That, how does whether the manager is there or not, or lives there or not, affect the zoning? I'm a little confused by that. It's not a requirement in any other type of business. And I think one thing we may not realize is that the power of reviews and the internet, I mean, whether you live there or not, if it starts becoming a hot sheets place, or as Chris had said, that was the impetus of this in the beginning, or it gets run down, or it's noisy or chaotic or whatever, the reviews will kill you. I mean, nobody will come because so it's the incentive to the innkeeper not to do anything, to be a good neighbor, to watch what's going on, to take care of the building, that type of thing. So.
Okay, do we have a motion on the floor for this?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think one was put forward.
By way of closing remarks, though, I mean, I would like to see as much attention given by this board to the needs of the neighbors and adjoining property owners and nearby, one of whom I am, in full disclosure in this particular instance, but it's interesting that I don't hear that much said about that. And in a dense part of town, downtown, where we already, enjoy the greatest density in Bristol, there ought to be some protections for people who have taken that on and, invested in that. And I would posit that their concerns and their interest and the potential impact on them is as important as the inn owners.
So
But I hear very little of that in this discussion.
Shall we move to a formal vote or thumbs up? How we want to handle this?
May I speak?
Sure.
I haven't said anything on this yet, but obviously the timely manner is a phrase that doesn't help me much, but I'm thinking of the patrons of this establishment and the need sometimes for information from a local source, and that would be the manager sitting at the desk downstairs. And these could be people from different countries or whatever. And if there's an incident, it has the word incident, which could be an accident, etc., to have some immediate help, not timely then means very, very quickly. So mostly I think I've been thinking thoughts like that. That's all. So having an in-house person is a safer situation for not only the neighbors, I guess, that John cares or is talking about, but also the people who are coming to the establishment. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion on the group of definitions, because there's two, right?
Oh, we were just talking about that one so far.
Or there's a hotel one too, so
Oh, that's right.
Since we were making the change to the inn, about basically having someone, we thought that a hotel is a larger, to make them consistent and as a larger venue should also have someone basically available to respond to the needs of either their neighbors or their guests. So we basically put duplicative language in the hotel to make it consistent with the change that we were proposing to the inn and guest facility.
So, has anybody got a belief to make a motion? Enough of a belief to make a motion?
I would move that we table this.
Okay, you want to second that?
I'll second that. I don't think this is relevant to encouraging residential density, which is the main premise of our work right now.
Any discussion?
So we were trying to fit this in with the changes, any changes to the UDR need to be voted on by the public, so we were trying to piggyback on the same timeline, otherwise we're looking at a timeline of another revision and public comment and hearings in another 6 months after this, or a year after this, or ever, as things go, because there are things that we have talked about when I started 7 years ago that are not resolved yet, just the way things go. Those obviously aren't critical path things, but just the nature of stuff. So I think that my thought is this is something that we can figure out and come to an agreement on this timeline.
Okay, I need one clarification though, please, for this. When it says personnel on duty, does that mean on site or by their
Or
phone?
available.
Quote unquote available by their phone or something like that.
Didn't you say on call? Did you read it?
It said on duty.
On duty is what it says.
And does that mean on location?
So one of the other things that we did for this was basically we made it a conditional use. And this will go before your development review. A new in guest facility would go before your development review board, and those would be some of the questions that they would ask. And those were, and they would make their decision as to, they have a lot more latitude than a zoning administrator. They're basically a body of Bristol citizens, and they'd make that decision.
You're saying we're not making the decision on what personnel on duty means?
That's right. I'm not. If you want to be more specific, you can. I can tell you, I would interpret it as meaning that there's somebody available that can be called or can get to it quickly. I don't think there has to be somebody sitting behind the desk.
But really, this is, your consultancy is about densification, right? So this is another issue.
It's a different issue.
Right, and the motion on the floor is to table this. It's been seconded. I'd like to call the question.
Okay, so all those in favor of tabling this, raise your hand or say yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Three. All those opposed?
No.
1, 2, 3. 3 and 3.
Say it again.
I say we keep talking about it.
So the way
So-
to think of on duty, one way to, and we see it all the time, and I use them all the time, is Airbnbs. You've got one, I mean, it works well. If I have issues, I call and the manager, I mean, I have people, we've had issues where we walked in, there was no heat, within 10 minutes we had somebody on site, so. I feel that works well, but that's just my 2 cents on a real life.
Smaller scale.
So
Right.
let's
Not-
go back.
Not 7, 8, or 10 rooms or whatever.
Let's go back. Is there somebody that's willing to make a motion to accept or apply these definitions? There's 2 of them. One's in guest facility, the other one's hotel.
I'll make a motion to accept these revised definitions.
second. I'll second them.
So is Rob and then Shannon second. Any final discussion?
Yes, will this, does this give a clear path to the proposer of this to just, are they all gonna be on the clear as far as their compliance with the regs at this point, if this were
Proposer of
passed?
this. You mean the initial request there? No.
Well, I don't.
You mean Tom and Carol Wells, let's just.
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
Use
That's
use
fine.
real words.
That's fine.
This being proposed by ourselves.
Right, it was brought to us by Tom many moons ago, and Carol's here to give us clarity, yes, they proposed it. If that is what the regs are, that would then bring their facility into compliance.
Carte blanche.
And allow the Tillermen to do what they want to do. Correct?
So if they still want to pursue that fact, yes, they could go down that path again.
One of my discomfort, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that if we're moving forward with this to vote on it, I would like to make it very clear that a hotel requires someone to be there in person 24/7. It's a hotel. I would be very uncomfortable with hotel with on duty at all times. That's a distinction quite apart from the inn discussion, but I think that's an important distinction.
So are you making a motion to amend then?
I'm making a motion to amend the hotel definition to say that on premise at all times.
Okay, is there any, need a second for that, right?
I would second that.
Second that.
So actually, John Beaches, Lynn, any discussion on full-time staff of some sort for a hotel?
On premises
On
was the proposal, right? And take out on duty and replace it with on premises. At
That
all
was my
times.
proposal, yes.
Yeah,
Okay, hearing no more discussion, all those in favor of adding of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Nay.
2 nays?
Were you an
Bill and Shannon. Okay, that sounds like
We're
it
nays.
passes.
Well, so that's the amendment passes.
The amendment passes. Correct.
To the hotel.
to the hotel.
So now the motion on the floor as amended is to accept the proposed changes to inn and guest facility and the proposed changes to hotel, including
Be amended.
the amendment of staffing requirements.
I will speak to that. I'm sorry, were you asking for a motion? Or-
No, we're
The
at
motion's
point-
on the-
You're right, so that's on the table. My discomfort this partly comes from and lasts from the fact that when it first came up, and then again at a subsequent meeting, 2 different meetings where you are asked specifically, I asked the chair specifically, where are these quotes from in your presentation of this to us? While you didn't say there was no earlier communication, you demurred it in such a way that I found misleading. And it put me on edge about why you would be misleading about that twice. 2 different meetings. And Chris never spoke up that he had gotten it. And Adam, you didn't speak up that you had gotten it and forwarded it to Chris.
We had that discussion, but you asked me to forward you those documents.
Well,
Time out.
when it first
So
came up,
this,
when it first came up, I asked, yes, I asked, where is this coming from? Do we have something in writing? You said no in so many words. The second time it came up, months later, I also asked, do we have something in writing? Is there something that these quotes are coming from? And you also led us to believe that no, there was nothing. And then it comes out of the woodwork recently. That's when we had that conversation. So I think that it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. It surely doesn't comport with the behavior that you proposed during our organizational meeting where we deal with each other straight up, does it?
I don't know, sometimes I don't talk specifically enough, I apologize if I misled you. It has been on the parking lot for months,
That's right,
and you at one point,
twice.
attempted to take it off the parking lot, which we
Oh.
said, no,
That's right.
we have a request to have that considered as part of the bylaw. So we're getting way past the question. Is we've gone through this thing, and as everybody knows now, the background, everybody knows now that we are trying to do something that is universal, is something that can be applied against various situations. So if I misled you, I'm sorry.
Twice you misled us.
Okay, I'm sorry twice then. So, and I didn't mean to make this some big cover up or anything like that.
Well, why
It
didn't
was
you come
just-
forward with that when it was first asked?
I don't
So
think
we're,
he
we're,
misled you, John. I think he said we're gonna leave it in the parking lot and just went on.
No, I specifically asked, if you review the tapes, I specifically asked, do we have something in writing about this? And you, in so many words, said no. And then the second time, months later, I asked specifically, I'm noticing the quotes that you put in your chairman's notes of summarizing this thing in the parking lot. It's got quotes in it. And I asked, where are these quotes from? And again, we don't have anything in writing. Nobody's put anything in. We didn't hear about Tom's letter
If I
until
didn't
recently. Is that
say it-
correct?
If I didn't say it succinctly, I apologize for that, but.
You don't think that's correct?
no,
But
That's not how I remember the conversation.
John,
When was the first time we heard about Tom's letter?
what does this have to do with the
Tom's letter.
question? What does this have to do with the question that's on the table?
It has to do with my discomfort with why I don't understand the deception that started this, and that has left a bad taste in my mouth about this.
so I would like
particular
to call the question, we're in
Very good.
discussion, I would like to call the question.
Great.
Okay, so all those in favor of the motion as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Sorry, I was gone for a second. Where are we?
So we are voting on the motion as amended for an inn and guest facility and a hotel.
I'll
So
go
we
aye.
have three ayes,
Or
four ayes. Anybody opposed? One opposed. Anybody abstaining?
I'm abstaining.
We have one abstention.
Okay.
It's like the math isn't working for me.
That's right.
That
So it's
carried.
four.
Four, one, and one.
Mhm.
If I may, I'd like to offer some context for the abstention.
Okay,
I was not privy to the prior conversations about this and the initial introduction of this, whether it was something that was sitting in the parking lot or not. And so I think that makes it hard for me to see it in context and how it was considered. I would also say that, if nothing else, we could split it out. I think we're all in agreement on hotel and approve that. It looks like we still have some discussion to be had on the in part.
I think we
For what it's
approved
worth.
it.
It just got approved.
I was sorry, that wasn't clear. I apologize.
It's okay.
Well, that takes care of that one.
square footage of accessory buildings.
Oh, business yard, we haven't done the.
Oh, excuse me. How did I skip that?
Wishful thinking.
Okay. So this one has not been approved by anyone as well, and we had comments in here earlier this evening in your public comment section. Again, at the meeting that we discussed this, the board asked Anna and myself to try and address it. I would tell you the language that is in here is mine. Anna and I had a long discussion about it, but I think at the end she was unable to support this. So what you have is basically my recommendation. And Anna, I'd
And to
open-
clarify, my lack of support was trying to arrive at a definition of business yard and village mixed. I don't support a business yard and village mixed. And so I just couldn't get there with Adam. He and I had a great conversation, but that was our conclusion.
So there you have it. The things that we changed, or that I guess I should say I changed, or am recommending that you all change. I tried to take out some of the, I guess I'd say the vagaries in here. So I took out the reference to or similar heavy equipment. So also took out the heavy or similar businesses. And where the majority, so or similar businesses, clarified business yards, We talked about storage as one of the things that they were doing, so I added it there explicitly. And then we added basically, business yards do not include, regular ongoing sales of equipment or materials, trash, recycling, garbage, or large-scale excavating businesses that do not constitute business yards. So tried to trim it down a little bit, recognize that you had historically had a lot of industry in the village business district, and that you're trying to bring, encourage new residential development and trying to basically find a place that worked. So that would be the logic behind what I put before you.
Do we have a definition of large scale excavating business?
I think we also changed this to, or it is conditional use. So again, it is something, let's see, let me make sure I'm speaking through before I open my mouth.
In the current regs, it's conditional use.
In the current regs, so we left it at the same. There is not a definition of large scale excavating businesses. But as a conditional use, it would go before your development review board. And remember, the first criteria is this basically appropriate in this district?
But it's struck from the definition though, right?
What's large scale, basically it's saying large scale excavating businesses are not appropriate. Right.
So go ahead.
I was just following up on that. What would that make the current business yards non-conforming and just be left in limbo there until they move?
It depends on whether or not they're large scale. And in the context of Bristol, I didn't feel like we could necessarily define that. I couldn't define that for this, so I left it there.
So like, there's 2 potentially large scale ones in town currently. And that's where I'm at, is trying to get things in conformity so you can do things or make changes instead of just kicking them into non-conformity and leaving them in limbo.
Because we have 2 business yards for businesses that would have like excavating equipment approved, and one that's going through the process as we speak.
So what are the ones that are approved?
You have Acker on Hewitt Road, and across the road from that you have Smith McLean.
So I'm concerned, I'm sorry.
No.
So I'm concerned that we're taking that function out of the definition, because it does provide a very valuable resource in the community. Nobody wants it in the backyard. So I had come up with a sentence to add back in, if you will, or modify it, saying construction yards with heavy equipment, and then in parentheses, with typical use of 10-yard or larger dump trucks and 95 horsepower or larger excavators or similar equipment shall be sited with direct access to a paved road. So I think a lot of the discussion has been around, in my mind, is the appropriateness of travel. So if you put the yard on a road, a paved road that has inherently, or assumed, maybe assumed is a better word, more traffic, so it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb, as opposed to the rural area where some of this stuff is being, causing problems. I think we can work that type of yard back into the definition.
I share the concern with Rob that large scale is undefined, and I just look at that as litigation bait. I don't know how you enforce that, so I would not approve anything that includes that phrase in it unless somewhere else it was clearly defined what that is. It's just too much of a loophole. Also, I'll leave it at that for the moment. I had another comment, but it'll come back to me.
Anybody else? Slim,
Well, about this large scale excavating, would it be wrong to just eliminate large scale? And wouldn't that then be read as a regular, say, construction company does some excavating, but they're not an excavating business? Or is that just too?
Would Livingston's would probably fall into that if they have another yard
I
somewhere.
tell you, anybody that's in Bristol is not large scale.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I don't know, are they?
Well, no, you look like, okay, the guys that are doing the water line, Munson's, that's large scale.
Look-
ECI is large scale. Masterson, it's got a lot of trucks, but he's not large scale.
So in other words, it'd be a loophole for anybody in Bristol.
I think that
Sounds like a loophole.
saying large scale and not having something that defines it much.
Yeah,
Major and minor subdivision are arbitrary until you put that threshold on there.
I agree. So we got 25 no trucks or something, you know,
You're right.
or 50.
Right.
you know.
And there's a related thing is, you know, like I could make a case, if I were a lawyer, maybe I would, that construction related trades include excavation.
That's my point.
Yeah, so we have a problem. I mean, one thing we can learn from in considering this is the experience that we have already with the applications that have been made under this definition currently. Arguably, both of them are not really compatible with the zones that they're in, mixed and RA5, I think.
I would argue against that statement myself.
Well, you could go live next door if you want and see how it goes, but I've talked to the neighbors and they don't feel it's compatible. And if we're encouraging, you know, at least in the mixed zone, we're encouraging densely packed development, and it just seems like idling trucks and anything having to do with excavating type business just doesn't really fit. And in RA5, maybe it's slightly different, it's more elbow room out there, but RA5 is really primarily about residential uses. And that's why when a business yard unpermitted popped up next door to them, they've been bothered by it because it has an impact. That's a real impact that they're living, not some abstract thing. So, yeah, I think we've got to think about it more. I'm definitely not down with the large scale because what is that?
So one of the things when I was looking at this one was the town plan itself, which is supposed to be a guiding document when you write your zoning and place zoning. Under your economic section, your goal is Bristol will attract and retain businesses that are consistent with the town to provide a balanced economic base while ensuring economic stability of Bristol residents. And the first policy says encourage retention of existing businesses and cultivate and attract new businesses that are consistent with the town's character. Excavating, there's at least half a dozen active excavating businesses in our town. If you remove excavating from this option, there's no place for them to go. So
C1.
no, it's not. But if you change the definition of business yard, there's no place for them to go. If you remove it,
C1.
if you change the definition that says what it says here on this, right here, the words excavating would mean, even in C1, if you say you can do a business yard in C1, you can't put an excavator in C1 because of your definition.
So I think, yeah, I get you.
Chris
I
does have a point. The definition
understand
applies
that.
everywhere. Yeah.
Which is why, when this conversation started, I proposed just eliminating this from the mix and the RA5 for the time being, till we could get it, you know, to prevent more of these applications coming forward, till we could spend some time on it. It's not really about densification. So that was my effort to say, let's deal with it when we're outside of the densification conversation, but let's not leave it open for more of these applications that come in that prove to be so problematic.
Shannon, you had any comments?
Sorry, I am up in the air on this. I guess I'm more with Chris on this, where I want to think that I think the business yard description needs to include not just that high density area or those other areas we've been discussing for the purposes of the excuse me, grant. But in general, I mean, we're a blue collar town. And I think that you have to consider that we're a blue collar town. So there's a lot of landscaping, there's a lot of excavating, there's a lot of construction businesses here. And so that's our bread and butter. And to look at that in terms of that description, we need to think of it in terms of all of the areas, not just the high density areas. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Bill,
I think if we're going to be reasonable, we have to make plenty of allowance for businesses to get started here and to grow here, and not restrict them to the point where they can't grow and then they either go out of business or move to another town. So I'm for more, in general, more flexibility and more tolerance of traditional ways of earning a living.
Anna,
Well, I think I already played my hand at the beginning of the conversation, but if the task before us is to make our village more attractive to people who want to create housing and have more housing density, we need to try to be able to consider that in balance with the other things. I'm not saying I don't want businesses in our town. If there's no place to work and no businesses here, then what's supporting our economic infrastructure. But I have a hard time with looking at even at the revised areas that we have said are village mixed, and saying, okay, like let's try to get people to put up a duplex or maybe a multifamily here, and provide people with a place that they want to live and take advantage of living in this great village. And next door, is diesel trucks and gravel piles and excavators coming and going all day. I think both are important, but I don't think we're doing a good enough job of saying which go where and how do those live together. And I say that full well as a person who is lucky enough to live in a lovely home in the center of the village, surrounded by other lovely homes in the center of the village. This will never affect me, but I want other people to be able to live in Bristol and have a really great quality of life living here. That's hard for me when we then say that you could have, if we do nothing, I mean, I don't know how much of this we're going to approve or not approve, but there are some business yards that it wouldn't be a big deal to live next door to. And then there are some business yards where you wouldn't want to build anything there. And if you lived there already and you invested and you built housing, and then what happens next door is, it's going to make the quality of life for those people such that they don't want to live there anymore. Then what does that do to the business of the owner who developed that property, who's relying on the income? And, that's a really hard balance. I did like the paved road piece though. I think that was a really nice addition.
Just an example of a business yard that does have housing near it or very close to it, and is actually seeing sales that have not been impeded. Heffernan Shop down off Hazel Drive is a contractor's yard. They work on their equipment there, they have it there, they have stockpiled materials there, they have machines in and out. There's 8, 9 homes that all are, that you have to drive by it or can see it from there. There's a multifamily house on within eyesight of their property that would be impacted by it. So there's an example where it does work, and they have some of the neighbors that are living in there have been there for a long time. So that's just an example where one does work well.
I'm just looking it up. Chris, so I can have the visual. I appreciate you giving a real example.
Yeah, well, there's a real example also on Lower Notch Road.
Okay,
where-
let's move to the
Where it's
question.
really not working,
There,
right? Where,
so we have a definition proposed change. We have a proposed addition to that definition. So I guess the first thing we do is consider the proposed change or addition to the definition. And then we'll consider the definition.
I would move that we strike large scale from the last line of this proposed definition.
So it would read trash, recycling, garbage.
Or
This is-
excavating.
Oh, you take out the whole
Yep,
charge.
yep.
There's a second to that? Hearing none. Sounds like it stays. I can I make a motion?
I think you can, yeah.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we add. You see trash. I would make a motion, we remove large scale excavating businesses from the last sentence and add to the definition, construction yards with heavy equipment. And then in parentheses, with typical use of 10-yard or larger dump trucks and 95 horsepower or larger excavators or similar equipment shall be cited with direct access to a paved road.
Still have classes of roads. Where some paved roads may not necessarily be equivalent to.
Put a class in there, I had to put class in there.
No,
Class.
don't put classes there. 'Cause
Okay.
Classes, a class 3 road could be paved or not paved. You just don't know.
Right, but class 2 is paved, right?
I believe a class 2 road is paved. Yes.
But I don't know which are which.
Yeah, what about state highway, something like that?
Yeah, well, I thought about that, but then you've got Burpee Road. You've got Moncton Road, Silver Street, whatever it is. You got some pretty heavy hitters that are paved. Where the traffic out of any excavator business in Bristol wouldn't be noticed,
Sure.
like North Street maybe.
Well, we could have a business yard right on North. That's a great idea.
There is.
We already do.
A new one.
Business, good.
So.
You're
I'm not
looking for a
hearing-
second
I'm looking
for,
for a second, am I not hearing one?
I'll make a second, Kevin.
Okay, any discussion?
Well, yeah, because the ancillary or next part of this is which zones we allow this definition to apply to, correct?
That could be a part of the discussion. After, well. Yeah, so does it make sense to go through the definition, and then if we want to revisit the areas,
The zones it's
the
allowed.
zones themselves?
Okay,
that makes
that
sense. You should be happy with
makes
the
some
definition.
sense and. Okay,
Any other discussions? So all those in favor of adding the clause about construction yards with heavy equipment? Raise your hand, say yes.
Yeah.
And removing the large scale excavating business, right?
Removing the large scale excavating business, yeah.
and
So
you're
we-
putting in your addition, correct, Kevin?
Yes,
Yes,
Yes.
we've got 3,
So large scale excavating business would come out of the last sentence, and then there would be an additional sentence added that basically said businesses with large equipment, and it would define large equipment as trucks greater than
10 yards.
10 yards and excavators greater than 95 horsepower,
Yes.
need to be on a paved road.
Okay.
So
I'm a little ignorant here. When you say 95 horsepower, can you picture for me the size of that machine, please?
So that's so like the one that the town has,
Okay,
the mini S, that's a small one. So a 95 horsepower or larger would probably be the middle size equipment that Munson's been using on Pine Street,
okay.
not the small stuff over there, the medium size, and obviously the big stuff is bigger.
Right, so that like the one that Luke Halleck, I mean, I know him and he lives near me. That's a small one, if you know that one, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a mini.
Okay.
So I think we started to take a vote. Can we say yes? So those in favor again?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll go.
No,
No.
Anna, were you a yes or no?
I was a yes.
Yeah, I'm a
Okay, we
yes.
got
Four and
four.
I'm just voting present.
Four.
But this is just changing the definition, right? There's a secondary
Yes.
discussion about the zones, okay.
And those opposed? I think
Shannon.
Shannon was opposed.
And John, you're abstaining?
And then
Yes.
abstentions is one.
that's correct.
that
I was
everybody?
opposed.
Is that all of them?
Yep.
So it does pass. It becomes part of the definition. So now we need to, enter.
Email me that at some point. Oh, you already said it.
Yeah, I can do.
Please send me that document so I can have that in the minutes.
So now we need a motion to entertain the definition.
Oh, I thought you were.
I would move that we strike the definition as any kind of use, that we prohibit that use in mixed and in RA5.
So wait, you're confusing uses with the definitions.
I thought the definition was.
So did we approve the No, we
You
didn't
just
approve.
did.
I think you
Yeah,
did.
Just did.
Yeah.
I thought
Oh,
you
we
just
did.
Yes.
Approved the
Okay.
definition as amended.
So it's not getting late or anything. So then I guess the thing we do next is decide which districts it's appropriate.
And I would move
I
that
wanted to
we,
make, go ahead.
I would move that we remove it as an allowable use in mix and RA5.
I'll second that.
So that would be commercial only. Correct.
Correct.
Yep.
And do we want to add it anywhere?
Well, that's not my motion.
Just, okay, I hear you.
Sorry, can I
Do we have
possibly
a
see
motion?
on the screen the districts again?
Yep.
Thank you.
Wait. Wait for that to come up.
Yeah.
That one, or do you want
The
to?
whole town.
Okay.
Okay.
So it would be this
So-
pink area here.
Here, and that's the only area we're discussing?
That's what would be left if we remove it from village mixed and RA5. Village mixed is the orange that Chris is hovering over now.
Okay. I'm sorry, can we make it slightly bigger for those of us who have bad eyes?
Trying to do it, I'm
Thank
trying
you.
to do it all. Is that better?
Yes, it's better.
So the motion on the floor that has been accepted is we remove it from village mix and RA5, which leaves it in commercial. Office commercial or just commercial?
Just commercial.
C1 commercial.
C1.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful.
Any
I
discussion?
did want to make, yeah, I wanted
Whoops.
just to clarify the example that you gave, Chris, of where a business yard works well with residential, was out on, Hazel Drive. That's in RA5. Is that, am I right about that? And so the density there would be different, and this was our previous argument, than village mixed as proposed.
It's actually an RA1
It's an RA1, okay,
or RA2, sorry, my bad, it's RA2.
okay. All right, I'm just trying to look at what the density was there, so,
It's 2 acres.
yeah. So that's different, just wanting to make that point. I just want to make sure I understood the example.
Okay, any other discussion?
I think that's too limited. That takes out a lot, and that puts the existing ones out of performance, again, doesn't it?
Well, they're grandfathered, right?
They're still not compliant, right?
They're grandfathered.
It doesn't mean they can do anything then. That means they could do nothing else, no changes or anything else. They would just have to shut down if they wanted to do, even change what they're doing. Right.
Mhm.
Kind of like a non-conforming duplex, right?
Correct.
Okay, so
I agree with Rob on that.
we have a motion on the floor. All of, let me see, let me get the phrasing right. Is your motion is to remove it out of village mix and RA5. So if you're voting for this motion, you're removing them. If you're voting against this motion, you're preserving them. Everybody clear on that? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
There's like two. Okay. All those opposed? Aye. One, two,
Nay,
three. Shannon, was that you?
Yeah.
yeah, that's me. I'm
So
opposed.
that's- So 2, 4, 1 opposed,
No, Anna was also a nay.
3 opposed.
No,
No, it was Anna, I had Anna and John as nays, and I had Rob, Slim, Bill, and Shannon as yays.
You got that back.
I mean, backwards,
by the
sorry.
way around.
You got that backwards,
You got the
right?
count right, just
Yeah, exactly, backwards.
So that means it
It is
doesn't carry.
correct.
Oh,
Can
So
I make a
again,
motion?
Yeah.
Can I now make a motion to remove it from village mix alone?
Okay, I have a motion on the floor for village mix.
Second.
Seconded by John. Any discussion on that?
I'll say that that's what I would have wanted in the first place.
Okay, hearing
Is that just putting one in limbo,
yeah, I mean.
or is it more than one?
Because Acker's potentially, I mean, Acker's moving to Middlebury, he's potentially, so that's probably a done deal there. And nothing is, so yeah, one would be definitely in limbo.
Okay, hearing no more discussion, all those in favor of removing village mixed as a use for a business yard? Raise your hand or say aye.
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 3. 3 yeses. Those opposed?
Nay,
Nay.
And 3. Yeah.
That's what I mean.
And we are increasing. And village mix is we're increasing the density to high density residential.
It'll basically be 4 units per acre.
And it encompasses.
Yeah,
With Rockydale and.
over Rockydale,
Rockydale. Down on the flats,
it's Hewitt Road too.
road, flats up through Burpee Road.
No, the orange, the pink here is commercial. So it's just removing it from the orange hash,
Oh,
so it's just moving it from here.
Not a landfill. Right.
That doesn't really seem compatible with a higher density residential to me.
yeah, I guess I gotta agree with that.
Is that your vote or not?
Yes, maybe. I hate to restrict uses, but I understand, so I have to say yes, I guess.
And think about it as protecting neighbors. Maybe that's a good way to turn it around.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then what else have we got?
What was that resolution of the vote? I'm sorry, Chris.
It was Slim John and Anna was yes to remove it. Rob, Shannon and Bill were no. Kevin voted yes, so the motion passes 4-3.
Thank you.
I'll deny that if anybody says it in public. So this next one, was something that Fred had originally proposed. And as he was leaving last meeting, asked that we consider it. So I took, to the best of my knowledge, and at the bottom of the chair note sheet, came up with a table of all the setbacks that we currently have on accessory buildings. And I guess the question on the floor, if I can lead you to it, Adam, is do we want to change any of that stuff?
Um,
So not to muddy, what Fred's question was about the application of the square footage, wasn't it? Whether it be footprint versus the usable area or livable area, or however you want to define it, include to count the floors as square footage.
He did have a struggle with that, but I think he was struggling with accessory buildings in general.
Okay, I understood that that's what he was advocating
Maybe I'm
for.
reading too much into it.
I don't
But I
know.
mean, yes, his concern, and it, again, it comes back to
His
the neighbor
backyard.
Yeah,
is the building has a 1,200 square foot footprint. But in his mind, it's a 2,400 square foot building, because it's 2 stories. And he would like, his thoughts would be to, when you talk about lot coverage or maximum size of building, base it on total square footage, not on footprint.
But we're pretty clear in that the regulations that we're talking about building footprint.
correct.
so the question would be, do you want to change that for accessory dwellings?
Accessory building.
Accessory buildings, excuse me, accessory.
Because it already
buildings.
applies to accessory.
Right,
Don't go there. Different beast.
So accessory structures don't matter, right? They're nothing if you put an ADU on top of them.
you have to get a permit for them, and then if you want an ADU, you have to get a permit for that.
It sounds like an end run around.
So the question is, are we okay with that? The one thing I would bring up is the maximum height is not diminished on accessory buildings in most districts, except we did for an ADU, and I think that's a little inconsistent.
I would stand behind lowering accessory buildings down to 20% across the board.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to accessory building being shorter than
Exactly.
the main building, 20% of the. Do you word that as 20% of 35 or 20% of the existing main structure? Main structure, not existing, but 20%.
Of the primary,
Less than the main.
of the
structure.
primary structure, so the verbiage is consistent, use primary.
Okay,
Consistent with what we said for ADU.
For, yeah, do have the document, use primary all the time.
Okay, so
Do we have a definition of how we're calculating the height?
the maximum height would be 35, and then other than that, it would be 20% for the accessory of whatever the main building,
so the
primary building
Could we
is.
count the basement towards height?
No, it's from grade.
it's a walkout.
That's what I was
So
looking for, Chris, the
Oh.
definition.
Vertical distance measured from the highest elevation of the
Pretty
principal side of the proposed or actual finished grade of the building to the highest point of the roof.
Okay, that's what I was after. So if you sit slightly on a hill and your house is up higher, right, then we're looking at, you know, you're looking at your house and saying, okay, and then if the accessory dwelling or the accessory building, sorry.
That's restructure.
Yeah, accessory structure, right, then it's gonna be, we're looking, I just was curious about exactly how we were measuring that, so that helps a lot, thanks.
If you,
Okay,
if you put
chair-
your, go ahead, Slim.
Okay, sorry. Can you, if trailing Melissa a little bit here, but I'm thinking of the people in one-story houses might have a difficult time even making a reasonably sized garage under under this percentage rule, perhaps. And would not perhaps a minimum figure be more fair and also work, like 27 feet or 25 feet or whatever you like?
Let's go the,
Set a maximum and then it's for accessory, because then if you do, say 28, which is. Right,
20% of 35. or
right, and
20%
then you
of
have a
35.
hard where a single story home could put on a garage with a ADU above it, a 2-story thing,
Building.
if that's what they wanted, a 2-story building. A garage with enough room to put a hoist in or something, whatever.
got a couple of those. Family.
Yeah,
Wouldn't be subordinate, would it?
So do I hear a motion to do something about this, or are we gonna pass and keep going?
I like it, I just need to find a better way to phrase it, to address exactly what Fred has kind of asked about, but to honor what Slim is considering too. And I mean, it's tricky because if, okay, just a garage and you have a 1-story primary residence, then yeah, it's that could get kind of tight. You know, but at the same time, if you have a 3-story home and you're close to the maximum, then that's a pretty big building that you're putting up right next to your neighbors. I don't want to make it convoluted, but could we do something about stories and height?
Doors are arbitrary, not arbitrary, they're hard. Especially in garages.
because if you have a peaked roof, that's lofted, and you can say you have another 20 feet in peaked roof, above your top story.
I like the height.
I mean, I think my garage, my original carriage house is taller than my house.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I have a 2-story house.
So.
The wording maybe the wording could be something like this, 20% less if we like that, or certain number of feet. Sort of like the square footage or the floor footage or the living, is it the living space for the ADU? It could be up to 30%, but a minimum of, you at least get, no matter how small your house is, you get 900 feet. So in this instance, you can subtract 20% from your maximum, the height of your building, or you get at least
How high would you need it to be?
whatever is appropriate. I don't really know what the good figure
Roof
is.
pitch.
Right.
No,
I'm trying to think, no, I agree with you, Slim, I'm just trying to do the math in my head.
It would all depend on the roof pitch and the square footage for how high that pitch goes.
Yeah, I'm
right?
trying to figure out what that minimum number is.
I would tell you to go with 28 feet. It's 20% less than 35.
And just
And
And just be done with it.
you could say if you say the greater of, somebody's gonna pick the greater of every time, but I think 28, if a story is basically 10 feet. 28 feet basically gives you plenty of roof pitch for an accessory dwelling.
Or a brewery.
I think the
Or-
distinction, not to nitpick here, right, is if I do a certain square foot building with a pitched roof, right, so it's a certain size and a lot of that height is a pitched roof that's pitching in, that feels very different, right, next door to someone's home, right, or their fence or their yard, than a building that goes as tall as possible and has a very low pitched roof and takes up way more of that physical space, right? That blocks out more light. It has a different impact.
It seems why the old regs considered those two different things because of the additional impact of putting two uses on top of each other. Get higher, an ADU might be one story. That's fine, but you add another use, it might be two or more, so.
Any thoughts on how we apply it to accessory building for maximum height?
I don't really, I mean. It seems like right now people are building accessory buildings that they know they're gonna put an ADU in, so then they just do that. It seems like we're forcing them outside around the block to get to where they wanna go anyway. We ought to bring them in so that it gets done well, you know?
So let's,
What we're talking about.
yeah, let's hear a motion here for something. Let's do something.
Right, I'm gonna come up with something. I'm gonna come up with something, right? Is that we're going to talk about, and someone would have to help me with the feet, right? But if we said, or the percentage, right, for this accessory structure, and to say that no more than so many feet of it can be the actual vertical walls versus the pitched roof. So I'm just playing, like if you said, okay, you can have an 18-foot tall building, for example, right? Whatever we cap, whatever that percentage is, but only so much of it can be vertical wall, and then it has to pitch in. I don't know, I'm just trying to play, right? But do you see what I'm trying to do?
I try and tell you to make it similar to your other regs, and you have a maximum height. And I think Slim was onto something about basically if you wanted to do a greater of, so the greater of 20% less than your existing structure or 28 feet.
But if you allow this, you're gonna have ADU structures, not subsidiary in any way to the original.
It wouldn't work for
does not
an
change it.
ADU.
No,
But you're gonna get the garage ADUs.
Yeah, that's exactly the point.
No.
We're getting them already.
No,
But we had this disaster of one on Garfield where somebody wanted to combine uses, which normally would be cool, but
so
the regs didn't have any guidance from the
So
ZA.
we already have agreed upon a height restriction on ADUs at 20% of the main structure, so the whole ADU scare is, I don't know if it's real or not.
Well, that's just an ADU, not with an accessory structure underneath it, right? It's an ADU, period, not ADU plus ... right?
So you're
To
saying.
be fair, I think John might be right.
If we
That's not
built
what
this
we
up.
intend, but I think you could interpret it that way.
Yeah, ADUs are not a magic wand to make other uses disappear just by adding one on top. You
No.
can't say, no, this other
So,
proposed use doesn't
so,
exist.
so in my mind, if you had a house that was 35 feet tall, your maximum, so this is just easier math for me. And you built under what we're proposing here, a accessory building that was 35 feet tall, same height. And then you propose an ADU, you would not be able to put an ADU in it because it is not 20% lower than the height of your existing primary structure. That's how I would interpret that. You could not have, because the use would not be, the structure would no longer be conforming, and you can't create a non-conformance.
Oh, you can't.
Yes, yes, John, I
Yes.
fucked up and have allowed it to happen. I'm sorry for the language, but geez.
I'm just saying, I'm trying,
Yeah.
the point is, no, that horse is not dead if you live next door.
So time, let's get back to the question here, it's like 10 o'clock, we're almost there. The question is, do we wanna adjust the maximum height on accessory buildings?
How about we say accessory buildings can be single story, usable story, and it doesn't obviate the pitched roof or doesn't exclude the pitched roof, and if you wanna have a two-story one, it's a conditional use. Nice and simple.
You can't do
I
that.
like it.
We're talking about
Yeah,
accessory
good.
structure, why not?
It could.
That's
for
not an
accessory
ADU.
Structure.
But an ADU, the implication of the state's use of ADU is an ADU, not a combined use with something else.
We're talking about,
So if we said accessory structures could be one story with the roof. Then double stories could be a conditional use. and
I'll make,
covered.
if I can make a motion, I'll make a motion that we will reduce maximum height on accessory buildings to 28 feet.
Will that have any effect?
Sure.
We'll still be building, like, going around the
So there's a
zoning
motion on the
process by.
floor. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Nope. Okay, so let's move on. The other thing, it was a Fred question, is in section 322, exterior materials on zoning applications.
I'm not comfortable
We
regulating
have
people's
an
materials.
appetite for that. Okay, so that's it. Is there anything else? Do we need to do a formal approval?
When you're ready to send it to public hearing, you should do a formal approval, yes.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the proposed zoning amendments.
I'll second that.
Somebody's gotta
Move it first.
move it.
Oh, okay,
No, I said I'd ask for a motion.
Oh.
So Shannon made the motion.
exactly.
We hear a second?
Can, not to drag this out, but can we see them all together? Cause I think there's some that we made a while ago that I don't recall, and I apologize for that, but,
Everything should be in the document
okay,
that I sent over, other than the changes that we've made this evening.
okay.
I think I'd like to see it all as one document.
I
It is,
apologize.
well,
With it,
With the exception of
complete-
what was done tonight, it is.
I'd like,
So with
Yeah.
that, you're gonna have to come up with
So how we, yeah. we're
an
gonna have to
additional
have-
meeting, because you have a hearing in 2 weeks.
Oh, okay,
Or
all right, that was gonna be my other question, what's our timeline on that?
Well, what you could do it, you could have a Zoom only 10-minute hearing just for that question. Well, nothing happened, 10 minutes in planning. That would be you'd have to do.
no second.
And you'd have to do it soon, at least 15 days prior to November 7th.
So that's like.
So, is the motion still on the floor?
Yes.
Motion on the floor.
I will second that motion.
So Shannon made a motion, Rob is accepted to approve the proposed changes to the zoning bylaw. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye, raise your hand.
I,
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Those opposed?
Nay.
3 opposed. Becky, Devin. So I say yes. It's 4-3.
Okay, now, I can make all these changes and make sure, you can make sure I get them right, and I can get them done by tomorrow. So you'll have them tomorrow,
It's kind of late tonight.
tomorrow afternoon.
Fair enough.
Okay, and then, so. If we get them tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow is Wednesday. Thursday, I'm out of pocket for most of the day, with that numbers. So Thursday, Thursday. How long do we need to take one final look? Can we do it Thursday?
You have until Monday. You can't, Monday's 15 days, right?
Monday's 15 days prior, 7th,
Whoops.
14, the 7th, correct?
Yeah,
first one's 7th.
So 31st, 24th is 14, 23rd is 15,
Monday.
Monday.
It's Monday, okay, so. Let's do this. If we get, Adam gives us this stuff by end of day tomorrow. By end of day Friday, if anybody's got any clarifications. Email me with those clarifications noted. And depending on what happens then, we will have to have a emergency meeting Monday.
You have to do it Sunday.
Well, Monday is 15 days.
You don't count the day of the meeting. So Friday's kind of your last day.
Friday.
There's your last week day. I mean,
Okay, so then Adam does his stuff end of day Wednesday, end of day Thursday. Anybody that is unclear as to what the modifications were or think they're inconsistent with the discussion. End of day Thursday, and then send them to me. Copy Chris, but don't send them out to everybody. And then based on that conversation, we'll make a decision whether we have to have a meeting Friday to hash it and do one more final approval. So everybody, does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so then I would like to have a motion to table B. Public notice and communications. I will send out to everybody communications that have been drafted today. John's done some and I've done some. Review them, send comments back to me. And then, we will start putting out what's agreeable to everybody.
yeah, so the public warning went out today. That had to be in the paper today in order to meet the deadlines, and that was drafted by the chair and sent to the Addison for your first hearing.
Or both hearings.
I know that I had to have it there today.
Yeah.
I had to scurry when I found out it was on my plate.
It's written up for both hearings, but, obviously the first one is.
Yeah.
So,
So your outreach and any social media stuff is what you're talking about going forward.
then, we got minutes last minute, so let's table the rest of the agenda. Anybody got any objections about that? Okay. Well, thanks for hanging in there.
To adjourn,
Need a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody
Aye.
opposed? Oh, I'm sorry, public comment. We better do public comment. Do you have any?
Jimmy's good.
Okay, so then we're back to being adjourned.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Night.